Hello, today on my channel you will hear an amazing story about life. I hope you enjoy this story. This one struck me to the core. Honestly, I still can't forget it. Enjoy watching.
No one had ever done anything like this for Bridget in her life. Tears welled up in her eyes, but Bridget ignored them. In her hands she held the will, according to which the former director of the firm had left her almost his entire fortune. Once, a few years ago, she had joined the firm as a young professional. The director had accepted her favorably, and this despite the fact that professionally she was quite inexperienced. For a while he tutored and taught Bridget the finer points of the craft. At the time he did not do it out of charity. Just wise experience was able to see the potential in Bridget and was going to turn a diamond into a diamond. It's worth noting that Will succeeded. In her business, Bridget became a real professional, we can say, a brilliant specialist. The girl appreciated a good attitude to herself. For her, Will became not only a role model, but also a friend. She immensely respected him. In front of her boss, Bridget not only grew up to a leading specialist, but also fell in love and got married. Her chosen one was Ajay. Bridget, I'd like you to meet him. This is Ajay. He will be your partner. You will always be able to rely on him. A very promising and intelligent young man. Please love and pity him, the director of the firm recommended Ajay. Bridget took the wish to love him literally, because a month later she couldn't imagine life without him. And 3 months later she and Ajay married. Will had no children of his own, so he treated Bridget and Ajay in a fatherly way, with special warmth. And yet he appreciates you more. Will could detect a note of jealousy in her husband's voice. Ajay, come on, why would you say that? Bridget tried to diffuse the situation. The best deals for you, interesting business trips for you, and all I have to do is clean up the mess. Her husband continued to simmer. Well, let's switch. I'll tell Will. He'll agree. Bridget was confused, not understanding why her lover was angry with her. Will really did single Bridget out. And not only for her intellectual abilities, but also for her ability to find a common language with people, to compromise. He also liked her decency, a quality not often found in the modern world. But Ajay, he could cheat and evade a difficult task, and all the responsibility, as it happened more than once, fell on Bridget's shoulders. Of course, this could not escape the experienced eye of a superior. Bridget, I have some not so pleasant news to tell you. The lawyer's voice snapped her out of her memories. The fact is that your ex-spouse has decided to contest the will and is now going to sue for the inheritance, the lawyer informed her in a sympathetic voice. Unfortunately, a person blinded by love sees only merits in his chosen one, even if people try to open his eyes. I hated the whole world to love you more, wrote Lermontov. That's what happened to Bridget. She loved Ajay too much to notice in time his meanness, greed, and tendency to betray. That night was one she would remember for the rest of her life. Bridget had managed to get her chores done early and was rushing home to hug her beloved husband as soon as possible. Because of work, they hadn't been together much lately. It seemed to Bridget that their relationship had grown cooler. So tonight she wanted to bring a little romance into the family life. Good wine, a nice dinner, music. Something to remember the old days. Of course, the fatigue from work was taking its toll, but it could be fixed. No kids, though. It turns out that she and her husband worked only to make their personal life more comfortable and better. But it was getting worse. Bridget decided that she would finish the last deal and they would definitely go on vacation. In her reverie, she didn't even notice when she opened the door and found herself in the apartment. Ajay, when is yours due? I don't want to run into her in the entryway, came a soft female voice. I guess she's been so into deals lately that she doesn't get back before 10 p.m. Come here, Kitten, the painfully familiar voice replied. Bridget took a step forward out of inertia and pushed open the bedroom door. On her new bed, her husband and a young girl in her early 20s were having a pleasant time. What's next? Ajay tried to explain. And what the mistress had written in her defense, Bridget vaguely remembered. It was as if the ground had gone out from under her feet. Once betrayed, betrayed again. She remembered this wisdom from her college days. That was what had helped her make her final decision. Parting was unbearably hard, but Bridget realized that she couldn't live with a traitor and pretend that nothing had happened. Hold on, Bridget. There are many things in life, but in every situation you have to keep your dignity, Will said. Will wasn't the kind of man to offer condolences, but his words stuck in the mind and could really be a comfort at a difficult moment. In his heart, he disapproved of Bridget's divorce, but he realized that it had not happened by her will, and there was no other way out. Bridget had no sooner recovered from the first shock with her husband than she was faced with a second disaster. Will had died, and now she learned that since the farm manager had no children of his own, he had decided to make her the heir. Oh my goodness. I spent so many years on that old man and his deals, and now it's all going to Bridget. Ajay resented him. The apartment part. But no, I'm not going to just watch $1 million go into her pocket. That's the thanks you get for your hard work. No. This kind of thing only goes through the courts. At first, Bridget was shocked to find herself the heiress to an unexpected fortune. The second shock came when her lawyer informed her of her ex-husband's decision to challenge the inheritance in court. I don't quite understand what Ajay has to do with this. Bridget looked at the lawyer in bewilderment. You're right, it doesn't. But only the court can make the final decision. So you and I still have a fight to fight, the young man answered her. Meanwhile, Ajay began to act. Usually he set goals and did not shy away from any means to achieve them. And so he did this time. The plan was to bribe a certain number of employees and persuade them to give false testimony. So you claim that the business of your former director was under threat, and it was only through the active actions of Ajay that the case was saved? The judge looked sternly at the man who was now in the role of a witness. That's right. Will had long been unable to follow the situation that was going on in the company. For health reasons, he was often absent. Ajay was in charge of things, the witness said, and glanced at Ajay. He smiled slightly, confirming that the man in cahoots with him was behaving properly. And you believe that Bridget's inheritance was illegally received? The judge asked the next question. Yes, I do. Again, the witness hastened to answer. The judge called several other officers, and all of them spoke with one voice as Ajay had instructed them the day before. Only those employees who held rank and file positions, which were mostly technicians, were telling the truth. Ajay felt that their testimony would play no role. Thus, it appeared that the witnesses who told the truth were fewer than those bribed by Ajay. Bridget left the courtroom completely disgusted. This trial is a circus. But I'm not giving up. I'm going to prove the truth. And what will you do if you win the lawsuit? My friend asked. That I would buy myself such an outfit, she dreamily sang. And I would also fly to Paris. You sit in a cafe, drinking wine and admire. Everything is just like in the picture. Passers-by hurrying by. Bridget also liked to travel, so she listened with a smile as Olivia shared her dreams. Except she had completely different plans. She wasn't working hard to win the case out of self-interest. Bridget remembered well that Will had been raised in an orphanage himself. He knew from his own experience what it was like to be without parents and live in an institution. Will had always provided sponsorship. He didn't need to be asked, it happened regularly, and the head of the orphanage was very grateful to him. Will's plan was to do some quality repairs, not just to paint the walls, renew the roof, but to fully staff the classrooms, equip them with modern computers. He wanted children without parental care not to feel deprived. Bridget knew her husband well. If he succeeded in getting the inheritance, Ajay would spend every cent on women, changing mistresses like gloves. It was her desire to make Will's plans come true that gave her the strength to follow through. At home, determined to distract herself from thoughts of the trial, Bridget began to sort through her papers. A packet from the medical center caught her eye. She and Ajay had been trying to conceive for several years, but all attempts had failed. The spouses sought help in clinics, took tests, but nothing concrete specialists could not report. There were no obvious reasons. After each examination, doctors only shrugged their shoulders and prescribed new tests. A lot of money and effort were spent, but all to no avail. It doesn't matter now, Bridget said out loud, even though there was no one else in the apartment. Good afternoon, Bridget. Excuse me. This is the receptionist at the family medical center. 2 months ago, you had a complete checkup with us. I apologize for the delay due to staff changes, but we're ready to give you the results. Unfortunately, they're not very comforting. The fact is, Ajay is infertile. That's medical terminology aside. I might add that you should never give up hope. Medicine is advancing, and we'll be happy to help you with treatment. But that's the situation at the moment. Bridget turned off her phone and thought for a moment. She and Ajay had indeed had a checkup, but in light of recent events, it was no longer relevant. They were getting divorced. What kind of kids could there be? But on the other hand, Bridget learned that the problem she had been trying to solve for several years was not her problem at all. Ajay, returning from the courtroom, was in high spirits. All the employees he'd handed the bribe to had given unreliable testimony, and everything was going according to plan. "You know, Virginia," he said to his mistress, "except Bridget's a little too determined, and you can expect anything from her. And I know her. We've got to do something to break her mood. Distract her?" he said, and then he continued, "You go to her tomorrow and tell her about the pregnancy. That here, they say, she is defective. Because of her, we didn't have children. And you were able to get pregnant? She, of course, will be upset and will not be so eloquent in court. War is war. All means well," Ajay said, pleased with his new plan. Of course, he remembered well how Bridget had dreamed of children, how she'd inspected the babies on the playground and gazed with fascination at the unwrapped diapers in the stores. She'd shared her deepest dreams with him. And now this frankness Ajay decided to use against his wife for his own purposes. He knew perfectly well how painful it would be for her, but that was the whole calculation. So to behave this way was not only mean, but inhumane. He hadn't really thought about it. Bridget had just made her sea buckthorn tea when the doorbell rang. She wasn't expecting visitors this late, so she was a little surprised at who it might be. She was even more surprised when she opened the door and saw the same girl she had caught on her bed with her husband not long ago. "Are you?" Bridget asked. She either hadn't noticed last time, or her belly was now more visible to others. Bridget noted that her ex-husband's mistress was in a position. "Yes," the guest replied. It was obvious that she was uncomfortable. After a short pause, she continued, "You'll excuse me, if you can, for last time. And anyway." Bridget thought her voice trembled and her eyes became moist. "The thing is, I'm very fond of Ajay, and he's fond of me too. When we met, we realized we couldn't live without each other. And you?" The girl hesitated again. "Ajay said that you haven't been in love for a long time, you work a lot and pay little attention to him. Besides, you know, you don't have children. Ajay and I are going to have a baby soon." The girl gently stroked her belly with her hand. "Ajay really wants a boy." Bridget listened to the guest very attentively, without interrupting. Perhaps in another situation she would have gone along with them. After all, Bridget had always been very sensitive to pregnant women. But now, with the results of the tests, and knowing that her husband was infertile, Bridget did not hurry to stop the guest. She was even curious how far she could go in her deception. Meanwhile, Virginia saw Bridget's silence in her own way. She decided that her lover's ex-wife was confused, and now she could try to make her feel better. "You understand, in my position, you cannot stress a lot, and any worries can adversely affect the baby." Virginia even tried to sob and furtively threw a glance at Bridget. "And there's the trial. And Ajay's really worried that he won't win. And then the baby and I won't have anything to live on. I'm asking you to drop the lawsuit. You're a woman. You understand? Any worries could cause problems with your pregnancy. And it will be your fault." Bridget was beginning to tire of this scene, but she waited patiently for the guest to finish her story. "Where are you studying, or have you studied? What is your education?" Bridget asked suddenly. The girl was confused. "I graduated as a barista," she said. "What does that have to do with this conversation?" She looked at Bridget in bewilderment. "You know, you're in the wrong line of work," Bridget said. "You should try acting," she said. She gave her a few minutes to recover. "The thing is, I know for a fact that my husband can't have children. Therefore, did you and Ajay decide to trick me, or did you decide to trick him first and then me? I think you realize that you and I have nothing more to talk about." Bridget turned and closed the door behind her. Knowing her ex, she had no doubts. The conversation that had just taken place was Ajay's idea. Bridget walked around the apartment for a few minutes, thinking about the right thing to do. Then she dialed her ex-husband's number. Hello. Ajay wasn't expecting her. Not knowing the purpose of her call, he made his voice cheerful and friendly. Hello, Ajay. I'm not going to sprinkle in congratulations on the fact that you will soon become a father and accuse you and your mistress I have neither desire nor time. You may not know this yet, but you're infertile. I have the official test results from the last medical center where we were both examined. If you don't believe me, I can email them to you. It turns out the girl who just came to see me isn't pregnant by you. Or are you just trying to trick me? Without saying goodbye, without listening to what her ex-spouse might say in response, Bridget disconnected the phone. She wasn't interested in who was cheating who in this dubious couple. The important thing was that she was out of this game. Virginia walked home, very upset. She had little doubt that she would easily be able to get her off balance, and then relieve her, and perhaps even beg her to withdraw from the trial. But events did not go according to plan. How could she know that Ajay could not have children, that he was infertile? Virginia was in no hurry to go home. Virginia didn't know yet what to tell Ajay, why she couldn't fulfill his errand. What if Bridget tells him I'm not pregnant by him, Virginia whispered in fear. Then pushed those thoughts away. No, they're bitter enemies now. Bridget wouldn't tell the man who betrayed her. Unfortunately, Virginia was wrong, and what she had so feared had already happened, but she could not know it yet. Virginia walked into the public garden and sank down on a bench. Young lady, are you ill? A passing grandmother inquired. No, thank you. I'm fine, replied Virginia. Although in fact there was nothing good for her in this situation. A year ago she was also sitting on a bench in the public garden. It was a pleasant summer evening. It was already starting to get dark. And a friend had texted to say she was running late. Virginia thought that Central Park was a rather quiet and crowded place, so it was safe even in the evening. But she was wrong. And who makes such a pretty girl bored? Virginia tore her gaze away from her phone screen and saw 3 guys in front of her. Come with us, you won't regret it, one of them said, and laughed wickedly. And if you don't want to go, we can carry you on our arms. You can't tire such legs. The third of the strangers easily picked her up in his arms. The vacationers, who slowly strolled along the alleys of the park, pretended that nothing unusual was happening. They were not confused by the fact that 3 guys were carrying a girl somewhere. The girl herself was clearly against it and tried to resist in every possible way. Let the girl go. She heard a man's voice. A guy about 27 years old blocked the procession. What's it to you? Go where you're going, as long as you can walk, one of the bad company answered him. Anyone who could have witnessed this scene would have realized the balance of power. There was clearly an extra. The preponderance of power was clearly on the side of the 3 hooligans. Daniel realized this, so he struck first. He used to be a professional athlete. Now he could use those skills. A few minutes later, Virginia was rescued, and the hapless admirers fled. Under these circumstances, and Daniel's acquaintance with Virginia took place. Except that all good movies end just so happily. But life, unfortunately, is less fair. The boys who accosted Virginia in the park turned out to be the children not of ordinary workers, but of parents with connections. In addition, one of them, Daniel, broke his jaw. Johnson Daniel Edward, you are hereby sentenced to 5 years in prison, the courtroom chimed in. Virginia felt stuffy, turned pale, and walked out into the hallway. At that moment, when Virginia so unluckily waited for her friend in the park, she was already EJ's mistress. Suddenly she had fallen in love with Daniel. In her eyes, he was a true hero who wasn't afraid to stand up for her honor. Without exaggeration, Daniel saved her. And now he was sentenced to 5 years. After consulting with her best friend, she decided to go to the prison where Daniel was serving his sentence, to see him. The date went well, very well indeed. In fact, Virginia's pregnancy was the result of it. Of course, Ajay knew nothing about what had happened. Virginia was afraid that if she found out, she might lose material support from Ajay, and therefore she would not be able to deliver packages to Daniel, and she would have nothing to raise the child that would be born in a while. There was another fear. Virginia thought about the fact that a person who is in prison will no longer be able to lead a normal life. What would Daniel be like when he was released? Tormented by these questions, she decided not to tell Ajay, who really is the father of the child. But as they say, all secret things always come to light. Ajay did not believe his ex-wife, but after receiving the results of the tests in the mail, almost howled with anger. It turns out that all this time Virginia deceived him. She had another man. Not only that, but she decided to have Ajay raise someone else's child. He couldn't imagine a greater insult to himself. What kind of games have you decided to play with me? Did you find a boy, or do you want to make a fool out of me? I don't even want to know who this child is, from Ajay blurted out angrily. Take your things and get out of here so I never see you again. Or you'll regret it, Ajay growled. The look on his angry face was frightening. Virginia had never seen him like that before. Ajay didn't let her say a word in his defense. It seemed to the girl that a moment more and he would throw her down the stairs. She grabbed her bag and ran downstairs. Bridget, having made sure that her ex-husband was ready to go to any meanness for money, was preparing for a new trial with special care. Except she had a vulnerable spot. She couldn't imagine what other nasty things Ajay would come up with. And he was a master at it. Every court hearing was like a new episode of a soap opera. And since it was open court, there were plenty of people who wanted to be entertained. Are you alleging that Bridget Swan used certain methods to influence the now deceased director of the firm? The judge asked in a stern voice. Yes, for the most part she did. The witness did not flinch a muscle in his face as he gave a completely false testimony in court. I ask you to clarify, what exactly do you mean by the word certain methods of influence? The judge addressed the witness. I personally saw Bridget Swan add some kind of drink to Will's coffee, after which he felt unwell, complained of weakness, and therefore mixed up all the important transactions. She could already make decisions that were favorable to herself. When it was Bridget's turn to testify, it seemed to her that whatever she said would no longer matter. Ajay was so skillfully able to dissuade all the employees and bribe them so skillfully that the justice was completely lost. But fortunately, the judge was experienced enough to suspect something amiss. He was a good judge of character. Bridget made the most favorable impression on him, but he couldn't say the same about Ajay. In view of the circumstances, the judge decided to adjourn the hearing and not to make a final decision until there was clear evidence that one side or the other was right. Bridget walked out of the courtroom and looked up at the sky. Gentle clouds were floating by, catching up with each other, unaware of human fuss, passion, and sorrow. Bridget sighed. She felt she had gotten a break, could recover, could regain her strength, and realized that in the end victory must be on her side. It's okay, I've had worse, she said to herself. At this time, another man was also looking up at the sky, but he was not in a busy city, but in a wooded area without a map or compass. This man was not a tourist who had lost his bearings, or a wilderness enthusiast. This was a man determined to escape. Daniel was serving his sentence when he learned that his mother had become very ill. He realized from the letter that if he didn't make a decision now, he would never see his mother alive again. Daniel had no way of knowing that his so desperate act no longer made sense. Megan had died before the letter was delivered to the colony. Daniel simply hadn't been informed in time. And as is often the case, some unknown good fortune accompanies people who decide to take a desperate step. Daniel miraculously escaped and miraculously made it back to his family. But instead of his mother in the house, where everything is familiar from his childhood, a castle was waiting for him. From the neighbors he learned that the dearest person in the world is no longer there. Mother was buried a few days ago. From the same neighbors, the district police officer learned that Daniel was seen at the place of registration. And you, Daniel, what are you doing here? Did they let you go earlier, honey? An older woman with bright red hair asked. He couldn't stay in his home, so he decided to go to Virginia's. He knew her address by heart. He would never put his beloved at risk, but there was nowhere else to hide. Virginia opened the door and almost fainted. Daniel was all she could say. Daniel managed to pick her up in time to get Virginia into bed. He went outside for a smoke. All sorts of thoughts popped into his head. Virginia was pregnant, but why hadn't she told him? They had only had one meeting, after which a child could have been born. Still, after a year of living among people who followed the every man for himself rule, Daniel stopped trusting even those closest to him. Do you have a cigarette? The voice of a drunken neighbor snapped him out of his musings. Daniel was not in the mood for friendly conversation. "If you smoke, smoke your own," he said. The neighbor, offended by this response, also decided not to stay in his debt. "Who is this guy?" One of them came by in a red foreign car. "You're both wasting your time." Daniel reacted immediately, grabbing his neighbor by the chest. He asked him who the suitor was and where he could be found. The news that his fiancée had been unfaithful to him made him furious. He decided that all the same he had no reason to stay free now, and therefore he could at least settle accounts with this businessman. "How long has it been customary to take other men's women?" Daniel asked. He gritted his teeth from surprise, from the fact that a stranger was dangerously close to him, and from the fear that anyone could break into his office so easily. Ajay was at a loss for words, but the security guards quickly oriented themselves, and within minutes Daniel was lying on the floor with his arms crossed. Ajay, having recovered from the shock, and not wanting to lose his authority in the eyes of the guards and subordinates, decided to take revenge. Of course, it was not difficult to deal with a man without weapons and with his hands tied. Putting a traumatic pistol to Daniel's head, Ajay began to dictate his terms. "I take it you're the convict Virginia's having a baby with. Wait, how did you get in here if you're still in jail?" A hunch struck Ajay, and he continued. "So you're a fugitive." Reveling in his power over the motionless man, Ajay had already recreated a new cunning plan in his head. "I take it you don't want to go back to prison?" he asked Daniel. When he didn't get an answer, he laughed. "I thought so. Then I have a business proposition for you. I suggest you eliminate one man, and in return you get a clean passport and my gratitude in the form of a certain amount of money. Now you have nothing to lose, so I'm waiting for your positive answer." "There is always something to lose," Daniel replied glumly. But Ajay already realized that he agreed. "I have nothing to lose," Ajay thought to himself, full of anger and a desire to annoy his ex-wife in any way he could. He decided to eliminate his rival physically. But the executor was not so easy to find, and so the case itself put everything in its place. Now it was necessary to arrange everything so that even the most experienced detective could not get to where the tracks lead. The best option, Ajay thought, was a setup. It had to be simple. No need to fiddle with anything. Genius is always simple, Ajay thought. The plan was for Daniel to pick a special moment and jump out onto the road just as Bridget's car was about to pass. Of course, there's no way Bridget would expect that. She will hit a pedestrian, and then the court, and accordingly the ex-wife will go to prison, and the desire for revenge of EJ will be satisfied. He wouldn't even think about Daniel. If he died under the wheels of a car, it would be even better. If he survived, he'd probably go to prison. Proving collusion between them would be very difficult. Of course, he wasn't going to prepare any money or a clean passport for anyone. Bridget was an experienced driver, but she had never broken any traffic laws. She slowed down as she rounded a corner. Suddenly, a guy threw himself under her wheels. She had time to react and turn the wheel. But the man still got caught. He fell to the roadway and didn't move. Bridget jumped out of the car. She used one hand to check Daniel's pulse. With the other, she dialed the ambulance. In plotting his cunning plan, Ajay had planned for everything, down to the witnesses who had happened to be at the intersection. They, too, dialed the ambulance and the police, and within minutes, the siren was blaring. Doctors were the first to arrive at the scene. They examined the victim and concluded that Daniel had only minor injuries. Bridget breathed a sigh of relief, but the next moment everything changed. The police at the scene of the accident immediately determined that the victim was a wanted man. Given the circumstances, Daniel was sent not to a regular civilian clinic, but to a special hospital with a special security clearance. Our special thanks to you, Bridget. You helped ensure that a dangerous criminal would return to the place he escaped from. When Ajay found out that all his efforts had been in vain, he nearly went mad with anger. I wish they'd give her a medal for catching a particularly dangerous criminal, he said to himself. But there was nothing he could do. Perhaps Bridget should have been proud of herself, but she felt uneasy. Instead of her usual tea, she poured herself a glass of wine. Tonight she needed to relax a little and somehow calm her nerves. She thought about how that unfortunate accident could have happened. After all, she was driving at a low speed. Bridget also had to remember to visit Virginia. As surprising as twists of fate can be, it was Virginia who had been her ex-husband's mistress. A few days ago, coming out of the entryway, she had bumped into Virginia quite by accident. The girl was very pale, almost unable to explain anything. She was crying and covering her face with her hands. Finally, Bridget managed to find out from her the reasons for this condition. Virginia reported that she was pregnant by another man, that Daniel was now in prison. She loves him, but had to live with Ajay, and cheat on him since she has no cash of her own to support herself. The pregnancy turned out to be an accident. I didn't want to, but I was afraid to abort. I was scared, she added, sobbing. I don't have an apartment, only a room. Ajay paid for it. And now, when he found out that the child is not his, he threw out my things. I don't know what to do. More tears prevented Virginia from finishing her confession. And then Daniel escaped from prison. What's going to happen to him now? I know he's been caught. Virginia looked at Bridget questioningly, as if she should have known all the legislation. Bridget didn't know what would happen to Daniel now, but she guessed it wouldn't be good. Even though Bridget's own life had been a mess, she had not lost her humanity. Having learned that Virginia is an orphan and has no one to help her, Bridget took this mission on herself, and now she was going to check on the girl, because she was in the hospital with a threat of pregnancy failure. In addition, as it turned out, Virginia had not one baby in her belly, but two. And if her words were to be believed, she was also only in touch with Ajay for the sake of the children, to ensure their future. Either way, Bridget felt sorry for her. Virginia seemed very vulnerable to her now. That's what led Bridget to take custody of Virginia. Bridget, you're so kind, so beautiful. You'll forgive me for the way things turned out with Ajay. He told me that you didn't love each other anymore, and that your breakup was just a matter of time. I feel so guilty for you. Virginia could tell that she was really struggling mentally. You know, I've been thinking for a long time how I could thank you for your kindness, for helping me so much. Her gaze fell on the nightstand beside the bed, where fresh fruit, yogurt, and other goodies were displayed. Bridget was trying to please her mom-to-be, so she was buying the best for her. Bridget, how would you feel about me appearing in court in your defense? I know better than most how many despicable things Ajay has done. You know, he's willing to commit a felony, and I want to stop him. In the time Bridget had told Virginia, they had developed a trusting relationship, and Virginia, as promised, testified in court, testifying in Bridget's favor and against her former lover. She admitted that she had been forced to go to Bridget's home at the insistence of Ajay, in order to put psychological pressure on her. The judge proved to be competent in his field. He analyzed all the information previously received and made a ruling that Bridget was entitled to be the rightful owner of everything that the late owner of the firm had bequeathed to her. Two people walked out of the courtroom. They had once been close, but now Ajay wished his ex-wife dead. It was the kindest of wishes. Bridget, on the other hand, felt like her luck had turned around, and all paths converged at the same point. Things had been going pretty well lately. Justice had been served, and she had won her case in court, and her ex-husband had been punished for his meanness. Only one thing bothered Bridget. Her relationship with her mother had broken down. For some reason, she was in no hurry to congratulate her daughter on her inheritance. On the contrary, she was avoiding all communication. Mom went to the cottage, which was outside the city, and did not answer the phone. Bridget always tried to be on good terms with her, took care of her. Therefore, it was completely incomprehensible what could make Mia behave in such a way. Finally, Bridget couldn't stand it any longer and decided to find out what was wrong. Mom, you're home. Bridget, finding no one in the rooms, went out into the garden. Mia was sitting on a bench, thinking about something. When she saw her daughter, she flinched but was not surprised. Sit down, Bridget. It was bound to happen sooner or later, she said. What was going to happen? Bridget didn't understand. Mom, will you finally explain what this is all about? I'm getting uncomfortable. Stop keeping me in the dark, Bridget said. Mia handed her daughter the pictures. Bridget took the pictures and began to flip through them, hardly looking at the faces. "Mom, what are these? I've never seen them before. What are you trying to say?" I could hear concern in her daughter's voice. But Mia, as a person who dared to do a serious deed, on the contrary, radiated calmness. "And you look closely. Do not recognize anyone?" she asked. Bridget tried to look at the pictures more closely and almost dropped one of the cards. "It's Will. I don't understand. Where did you get the picture? Where is he so young?" Bridget was obviously nervous, waiting for an answer. "He once handed me this picture in person many, many years ago. Look, there's a signature on the back," her mother replied. "As in eternal memory. With love." Will was written in firm handwriting. Without noticing whether her daughter was listening or not, the woman told her story of her youth, of a crazy love that had made her head spin and the ground fall away from under her feet. It was the story of her love and Will's. Then 40 years later, he became Will, the firm owner as he was known to those around him. And to Mia, he was Willie. Bridget listened to her mother, holding her breath, and then tears treacherously rolled from her eyes. "I wanted a beautiful life, a certainty of tomorrow. And Will, though he loved me, couldn't give me any of that. He, too, dreamed of making it big. But dreaming doesn't make you rich. I met your stepfather by chance. He was so handsome. He could afford to take me to any restaurant. I knew I'd be safe with him, and I could fulfill all my dreams. But what I didn't know was that you can't forget your first love. Especially when you have such a vivid reminder." Mia looked at her daughter expressively. "Are you saying, Mom, that this is my father? And you kept silent all these years?" Bridget asked, wondering what was happening to her. "Yes, you are his own daughter. Nicholas is your stepfather, only he didn't know it. I realized I was pregnant when I'd already broken up with Will and was dating Nicholas. And that inheritance you had to fight so hard in court is rightfully yours," my mother added. "Will is your birth father." Bridget had to think it over. She was in no hurry to answer. On the one hand, her mother had kept the secret for so many years. Even though she knew her daughter was in contact with her own father, she considered him a stranger. Bridget had gotten into this firm by accident. She might not have. And then she would not have been destined to see her father. She knew in her heart that it was not easy for her mother to keep such a secret. But she couldn't talk to her about it yet. Mia remained seated on the bench. She had nowhere to hurry. The heaviness that had been weighing on her heart for so many years was gone, and she could breathe in peace. Only now, along with relief, there was an emptiness in her soul. As if life had been lived in vain. As if she had once made a mistake that she had to pay for all these long years. But the saddest thing was that, betraying her love and choosing a rich man instead of Will, Mia paid off quickly enough. Nicholas squandered his father's money, and his own business could not create. Will, on the other hand, persistently went to his goal. He saw all his life and loved only Mia, but did not consider it right to interfere in her family life. If one were to turn back the clock, she would have acted very differently. The birds sang peacefully. I wanted to think about eternal things. Bridget walked down the alley of the town cemetery and headed for her father's grave. She was pleased that she could be proud of Will. That's what a real man should be. He was the kind of man who managed to achieve a lot in life, yet retained his human qualities and could not remain indifferent to those who found it difficult to live in this world. Bridget got down on one knee near her father's grave. "Here, Papa, I have come," she said quietly, as if waiting for a reply. "I'm sorry I didn't know before. I'm sorry." Did Will himself realize that Bridget was his daughter? Maybe he'd made inquiries, hired a detective, or just his father's heart. Now it was a mystery forever. Bridget, however, had one more piece of unfinished business. She remembered how her father had dreamed of making good repairs to the orphanage and wanted to make it happen. But she also remembered that he was very wary of any kind of middleman. It is not easy to find a reliable person, and I want the money to go to the children for the good, not to leak into other people's pockets. I don't trust any funds. I want it to be hand-to-hand, smiled the director of the firm. "Olivia, do you know where to find a reliable specialist who could organize the repair of the orphanage? Maybe you can recommend someone?" Bridget asked her friend for advice. There is one. Olivia rejoiced. He has his own firm. The reviews are positive. I can give you the contacts. Bridget was used to solving problems quickly, and the next day she gathered information about the company. The reviews were indeed extremely positive. A day later, she and the head of the construction company signed a contract and shook hands. I hope the work will be done well and on time, Bridget finished the conversation. We can't do otherwise, Kieran assured her. Bridget, trusting the construction company, which had an impeccable reputation, did not suspect that her ex-husband has already started his intrigues here. He managed to infiltrate his man into the company. This time the plan worked to the fullest. The traitor managed to find out important information, thanks to which the account of the company was written off huge sums of money. And this money was intended just to carry out repairs. The fake person did a good job, because he had his own interest. He and Ajay split the profits in half. He's probably done this kind of thing many times before. Since all the evidence was well destroyed, none of the interviewed employees could say anything specific about this man. Just an ordinary guy, just like everyone else, living in the middle of nowhere. True, he has no relatives either. Even in common photos, he did not show up anywhere. Yet Bridget sighed. You could tell a professional was working on this. She'd given up all hope that she'd be able to track down this crook. And the most frustrating part was that now the renovation would have to be put on hold. And how to explain this situation to the director of the orphanage and the children themselves? How do I look them in the eye? Bridget, it's none of my business, but I know something about your ex-husband and his accomplice. Bridget turned to the man who addressed her and listened attentively. The thing is, I was just laying tile here and I happened to witness the conversation. If I could have guessed what the conversation was about, I would have intervened. Those bastards ruined the whole thing. What kind of despicable people would steal from children? The boy said it with such fervor that it seemed that if Ajay and his accomplice were standing in front of him now, they would not be able to get away with it. He gave Bridget the gist of the conversation, and together they collated the details. Bridget decided that acting on her own in a case like this would be foolish and risky. She turned to law enforcement. The criminal group led by her ex-husband was detained. Ajay managed to spend some of the money, but quite a large sum remained untouched. Bridget, I want to thank you. You have no idea how helpful you've been. And not just because I recovered the stolen money. It's an honorable thing for me to renovate the orphanage. The man who started it all is my father. I didn't find out until after he was dead. Bridget did not notice how she shared her worries with a stranger. Bridget was not indifferent to such a revelation. He had liked Bridget at first sight, and now she was getting closer and closer to him with every word. Bridget, would you mind if I invited you in for a cup of coffee? There's a cozy cafe here. We can have lunch and talk. Bridget accepted the invitation and then accepted the offer to go on a date. Bridget didn't stop there, and the next offer he made was to become his wife. There are times when you meet the right person in your life, and you immediately know it's the one. That's exactly what happened to Bridget and Bridget. They decided not to hesitate, but to become husband and wife, never to part again. Now there was only one thing missing for happiness. In her heart, Bridget still had hopes of becoming a mom, but she didn't even dare to say those dreams out loud. The morning had just begun when the phone rang. Bridget, this is Maternity Ward 3. Can you tell me who Virginia Swan is? Bridget didn't immediately realize who she was talking about, but then she did. Swan is her husband's ex-lover. Virginia? You could say nobody, she said confusedly. My acquaintances. And then on the other end, the interlocutor paused. After some confusion, the woman's voice continued. The thing is that Virginia gave birth to twins 2 days ago and then ran away from the hospital. There was no prior interview with her, but this morning the nurse found a note on the bedside table with a note refusing to give up the children. And it had your phone number on it, so I'm authorized to call you. Maybe you can shed some light on the situation. Escaped how? Bridget didn't understand. Well, she just disappeared, she said, a bitter chuckle in her voice. Unfortunately, there are some moms, we call them cuckoos, who give birth and drop off their babies. Now the babies will be transferred to a baby home and then to an orphanage. Unless, of course, the woman's voice softened, if someone decides to adopt them. "Could you tell me the address, please?" Bridget asked. She was used to making quick decisions in the most difficult situations. She had a lot of experience in dealing with different people, and thanks to her firmness and instant reaction, she was able to brilliantly conduct the most complicated deals. Then it was a matter of business, and now it was the lives of 2 babies. An address was dictated to her. "I'll be there in an hour," Bridget said just as firmly. In her heart, she had already made up her mind. These babies would never go to an orphanage. They will not be condemned to wait and search for love forever. Bridget doesn't have children of her own. So who's to stop her from making these ones happy? How she would explain her impulse to her husband, she did not know yet, but somehow she was sure that he would fully support her. It simply couldn't be otherwise. At that time, the mother cuckoo was already on the train to meet her husband. And as it seemed to her at the time, fortunately, Daniel was transferred to a colony somewhere near Seattle. That's where Virginia hoped to find him. The decision to leave the children was not difficult for her. She did not hesitate to make a deal with her conscience, reasoning that if the state was able to raise her in an orphanage, then her children would not be neglected. And it would be difficult for her with 2 kids without a job to raise them. But now she's not burdened with anything. And then she and Daniel can start over. Young people often don't realize how hard it is to make up for frivolous behavior. Bridget had no problems with the paperwork. Her financial and family situation met all the criteria. In addition, the maternity ward was very accommodating. The supervisor was sympathetic to the situation and was also not interested in having such wonderful babies in an orphanage. Besides, as Bridget had expected, Bridget supported her in everything. And now their home was filled not only with happiness and love, but also with sweet cares and children's laughter. Bridget literally idolized his wife, and she reciprocated. The 2 babies slept peacefully in their cribs. The clock on the wall counted down the minutes. Bridget had just gotten out of the shower and was about to make himself some coffee. He looked out the window and thought life was wonderful. "Bridget? Bridget." When he heard Bridget's voice, he rushed into the room. Look, Bridget handed her husband the test, which showed 2 obvious red stripes. What happened next, neither Bridget nor her husband could describe in words. It was a whirlwind of happiness. Bridget grabbed his wife in his arms and circled for about 10 minutes, knowing what he would name his future son or daughter, and how much he would love them all. And Bridget laughed, though tears ran down her cheeks. She had dreamed of this, and it seemed that her dream had come true. Jennifer pressed the brake pedal smoothly. There was a sharp turn ahead of her, and right before the exit to the bridge, such a dangerous moment, she had to be careful. That's why she decided to slow down. Jennifer was not a very experienced driver in Los Angeles and preferred not to take any unnecessary risks, all the more so in just a month she was going to be married, and her fiancé had given her a car. Not a new one, of course. Use, she said when he mentioned it. But why? I mean, if money's a problem, I could do without a car for now. It's not that, Kirill replied softly. I just don't see the point of buying a new one when a used one, still in good condition, can be bought much cheaper. Besides, I'm sorry, but you just got your license. Anything could happen. You'll feel sorry for a new car. Not so sorry about this one, he said. Are you saying I'm inexperienced? Jennifer was insulted. No, of course not, laughed the groom. It's just that I remember when I was a beginner myself. You'll get the hang of it, and if you want, we'll both buy you a new car. Yes, perhaps you're right. She really did not resent Kirill at all. After all, his arguments made sense. Besides, he had always been very thrifty and adhered to the philosophy of prudent economy, including due to this Jennifer had chosen him out of several possible suitors. So what was there to complain about? Besides, although the groom said that there were no problems with money, she realized that it was not quite so. To be more precise, he had money, but only to spend them on expensive purchases was not too reasonable. For several years, Kirill had been successfully developing his own business, which still required considerable investments, including financial ones. Of course, in some ways he had it easier than the others. He got the money to start the business from his parents, who were already long-established businessmen. In addition, they could give him valuable advice, but that was the end of their participation in the affairs of their favorite son. From childhood, he was taught to be independent. She was from a simpler, though not poor family. Her parents worked as middle managers, received quite good money, and had no ambitions for their own business. Her daughter followed in their footsteps. She managed to work in several firms and a little advance in her career before she met Cyril. Already during their relationship, her fiancé offered her a place in his company. And not just any position. She was to be his partner. But no, she firmly refused. I have too little experience for such a responsible position. As I have not that much, Cyril objected. I learn everything literally on the fly. Well, you still have some knowledge from your parents and the experience of running your own business. I'm just not ready for that. Okay, well then how about this? You come to me in the same position you're in now, and at the same time we will tighten your knowledge and skills so that you can become a full partner, said Cyril. After all, if something happens to me, who but my wife? I will leave the management of the business. I don't say that Jennifer, who was prone to some superstitiousness, said indignantly. She was on her way home from work now. Her fiancé, as usual, was still in the office. He had a lot more to do than she did. That was the main reason Jennifer had gone to get her driver's license in the first place. And after that, she got her own car. Getting from the city office to their country cottage without a car was not very convenient. Suddenly, Jennifer realized something was wrong. She should have turned right. But no matter how hard she turned the steering wheel, the car kept going straight ahead. Later, the bridge railings showed up, looking too flimsy. It was clear that they would not support the weight of the car if she drove into them, even at a low speed. Jennifer went into a state of panic. She didn't understand what was happening and pressed the brake pedal as hard as she could in desperation. But it was too late. The car rammed the railing and flew straight into the river. As if in slow motion, it began to sink under the water. Whether from the collision or from too much stress, or maybe all of them together, Jennifer lost consciousness. A traffic jam began to form on the shore. Passersby stopped and got out of their cars. Gradually, a crowd gathered on the bridge, and all these people watched helplessly as the tragedy unfolded. Everyone wanted to help, but no one knew how. We should probably call an ambulance, someone said. No ambulance, he objected. We need an ambulance. The paramedics won't dive into icy water to pull her out. By the time the intercom gets here, she'll be drowned. Call at least someone. After all, shouted others, you're so smart. The crowd quarreled, argued, and could not come to a consensus. Someone did call the rescue team or the doctors. However, it was clear to everyone they would not get there in time. Precious time was lost. The bright red car was sinking deeper and deeper under the water, taking the woman behind the wheel with it. The count was no longer minutes, but seconds. No one in the crowd realized where this guy had come from. Obviously a vagrant, his appearance in dirty, tattered clothes certainly did not come by car. Before people realized what was going on, this new character threw off his old jacket, and without thinking for a second, dived into the cold water. When the mysterious stranger swam to the car, he too was completely engulfed by the turbulent river. And then the man dived in. The crowd seemed to hold its breath and watched along with him. The noise ceased instantly, and an ominous silence hung over the bridge. A minute passed, a second, a third, and then, at last, the brave man's head appeared above the water. And not only him making powerful rows, he was obviously dragging something heavy behind him. The tension in the crowd was building. It seemed to have begun to rise with a new force. No one realized if Jennifer was alive, or if the drifter had only succeeded in making the rescue service's job easier by pulling her body out. Meanwhile, the hero himself, paying no attention to anyone, reached the shore, and putting the hapless driver on the ground, began to perform resuscitative actions. After a few seconds, Jennifer coughed, began to spit up water, and opened her eyes. She could only stare at her savior in surprise and gratitude, unable to utter a single word. But the crowd, which later managed to move from the bridge closer to the new place of events, exploded with applause and jubilant shouts. The ambulance that everyone had been waiting for arrived, and no one noticed how the mysterious man disappeared, not even bothering to take his dilapidated and probably the only jacket. Jennifer was taken to the hospital. A couple hours later, her fiancé arrived there as well. At her request, the doctors notified him of what had happened. But of course, he did not know any details and was terribly worried all the way, not imagining in what condition he will see his beloved. In addition, Kyle blamed himself for what had happened. He was well aware that the most likely cause of the accident was a car malfunction, which he had overlooked when buying the car, all because of his idiotic desire to save money. Would not have taken for his beloved a new car straight from the showroom with a warranty, or at least not stingy on a normal diagnosis. But no, I believe the previous owner that the car has recently been serviced and no problems were revealed. "Honey," Kyle exclaimed when he saw her, "how are you feeling?" "I'm fine now," she reassured him. "The doctors say it's a miracle I didn't suffer any serious injuries in the fall. However, it could have ended much more sadly, if not for the help of a concerned person." "What kind of person?" Kyle asked. "Did he leave any contacts? We should thank him." "Thank him? I don't know. He looked like a vagrant, but he didn't leave anything. In fact, he left so fast he forgot his stuff." Poor guy, Kyle sympathized. Then all the more reason to find him. Knowing her fiancé's stubbornness, she didn't argue with him, though she didn't want to bother a man who'd made it so clear that he didn't want any more attention. But it was impossible to change Kyle's mind. He had taken up the search for the unknown drifter with enviable enthusiasm. He even drove to that ill-fated bridge and searched the neighborhood for the stranger. In addition, connected all his many connections, and in the end, it gave the result. It turned out that near the scene of the incident were installed KEKTV cameras, and Kyle managed to get footage from them. As it turned out, the stranger walked along the bridge often and quite often accompanied by a large and shaggy dog. On some of the shots was quite well seen the man's face. Moreover, he always came from the same direction. That seemed to be enough information for the restless Kyle, armed with several printouts of the camera footage. He went to the bridge again and tried to repeat the part of the tramp's route that he knew. And when he finally lost the trail, he turned to the people. Some passers-by on the street undoubtedly recognized the man with a large and, according to their assurances, very kind dog. However, no one could pinpoint where he lived. Kyle didn't give up. Again and again he came to the neighborhood and asked passers-by. Each time he had a small bag with him. As a thank you, he decided to buy the vagrant a new jacket. It seemed to him especially urgent, considering that winter was just around the corner. But no one had been able to point out to him the exact location of the tramp. Perhaps 3 weeks of fruitless searching would have cooled the ardor of any other man, but not Kyle. His failures only encouraged him to continue his search with more and more enthusiasm. After all, it wasn't long before his own wedding, and now, finally, his efforts were rewarded. Once again arriving at the place, he was surprised to see a big, black, shaggy dog. It was the same one he had seen on the videotapes many times before. Even though all the other dogs looked the same to him, this one he would recognize out of 1,000. Standing next to the animal was its owner, a young man about the same age as Kyle, only very thin, a walking skeleton. His clothes, just a light windbreaker over his shoulders, emphasized this feeling. It wasn't May or August. Kyle walked straight toward the strange man, wondering how best to start the conversation. He still felt that the successful outcome of the search was, if not his own doing, then certainly a coincidence. But as it turned out, he was wrong. The stranger spoke first, and not in a very friendly manner. "I take it you've been looking for him here for weeks, showing pictures to people and asking about me?" "Yes, I am," Kyle said. He was so taken aback by what was happening that all the phrases he prepared had slipped out of his head. He didn't know how to react to such a cold reception, and he felt, if not threatened by the tramp, then certainly unfriendly. "And why, may I ask?" continued the stranger. "I needed you," said Kyle, who had regained his composure. "You saved my fiancée, Jennifer. You remember, don't you? A woman fell off a bridge into the river with her car. You pulled her out and gave her first aid. That's something you don't forget." The stranger's tone softened a little. "Let's go and talk, if that's what you want. You're not going to find this place very cozy, but that's the way it is." Kyle got the impression that the drifter wanted to get out of the crowded place as quickly as possible. It was consistent with what he'd seen on the cameras, though. The man avoided large crowds and walked his dog mostly when there wasn't a soul on the streets. While the businessman was pondering what such secrecy could mean, the man and his dog led him through some dark back alleys. However, it did not take long to wade through them. In about 10 minutes, they came to a house in the countryside which looked abandoned, and that was where they were headed. "Are you hiding from someone?" Kyle couldn't help his curiosity. "Why would you say that?" His companion's response was a little harsh. "No, I'm just..." Kyle hesitated, then changed the subject. "What's your name?" "Andre." "I'm Kyle, nice to meet you. I brought you something." "No offense, but you left your jacket on the bridge. I thought you weren't too rich to throw things away." He handed Andre a package with his gift. He did not refuse, accepted it calmly, only dryly throwing, "Thank you." They were silent for a while. Kyle looked at the house, as empty and abandoned on the inside as it was on the outside. The only indication that someone lived there was a pile of rags, and in the corner, the dog that the makeshift bed seemed to be for had piled up on top of it. "Listen, you can't live like this," Kyle mumbled, dumbfounded. "I know it wasn't a good life. You must have some serious problems. Let me help you." Andrew shook his head in the negative. The conversation had obviously reached an impasse. One of them was clearly unwilling to make contact. The other had no idea what to do about it. There was an awkward silence, interrupted only by the strange sounds coming from the dog. He was doing something in his corner, not paying attention to people. "At least come to the wedding," Kyle tried again. "It's in a few days. But don't worry about clothes or anything. I'll buy and pay for everything. Just come. I think Jennifer will be pleased." "Yeah, well, who am I going to leave the dog with?" Andrew muttered. "Well, if it's really a problem, there are ways to solve it. You know, the hotel lounge. I've heard that a private person can temporarily take the animal in. But honestly, I don't think it's a problem for him to be alone for a few hours. After all, he wasn't with you when you rescued Jennifer." The conversation went on like this for quite some time. Andrew made up the most ridiculous excuses not to go to the wedding. Kyle, in turn, was getting into the same state of excitement that kept him from stopping his search for the mysterious stranger. After a while, he was ready to argue into the night, just to convince his opponent. and the latter, apparently realizing this, finally gave up. "But all right," he said. "I'll be there, but not for long." Kyle feared he was just saying that to get him off his back, and when the day came, Andrew would simply not show up at the restaurant, return all the things he'd bought, apologize, and say he couldn't make it. The dog got sick or something ridiculous like that. He was so unsure of the guest's presence that he didn't even bother to inform Jennifer. Figured if he showed up, it would be a nice surprise. Otherwise, the bride would have no reason to be upset on her wedding day, unless she was given hope of something pleasant. Nevertheless, Andrew did show up. He kept modestly away from the general fun, did not talk to anyone, and answered all questions briefly in one-word answers. But he did show up. Apparently, he was such a man that he couldn't break his word. At that moment, Kyle had even more respect for the strange drifter, and everything seemed to be going well, except that he noticed that the bride, who had been cheerful and contented with her life since morning, had fallen into either despondency or some kind of reverie. No, of course she was smiling, chatting amiably with the guests and all that. But Kyle knew his beloved too well to know something wasn't going nicely. "Is everything okay with you?" he asked quietly, as soon as he had a chance to talk without being heard. "Why did you bring Andrew here?" she asked bluntly. Kyle hesitated. He'd probably expected any answer he could get, but not this one. "I thought you'd be happy to see him," he replied dazedly. "I am so glad, of course I am. But you see what's the matter? He's not happy to be here at all." "I don't know why. No, I think I do. He's just a vagrant with no home of his own. Everyone here is rich, successful. How do you think he feels about that? He's been ripped out of his normal world, plunged into all this luxury to entertain the fiancée of a rich businessman, and then shoved back into his miserable life." "I don't think that's the point," Kyle argued seriously. "In fact, I offered him all kinds of help, and he wouldn't work for me. He wouldn't take the money, as if this miserable life suited him just fine. But you're right about one thing. He obviously didn't want to come here, and maybe I shouldn't have talked him into it so much." "I don't know why I was so insistent," Jennifer laughed. But she didn't have time to continue her thought. The Toastmaster had been entertaining the guests with some background and, by and large, without attracting the attention of the guests, suddenly decided that it wouldn't go on like that. Some silly contests and other entertainments requiring the obligatory participation of the public began. "And you, young man, why are you standing idle?" he asked suddenly, obviously addressing Andrew. He was ready to leave and decided that his conscience was clear. He had kept his promise, and now he could go home quietly, without too many farewells. But now everyone's attention was drawn to him, and it was no longer possible to do so. Meanwhile, the Toastmaster continued. "And by the way, it has come to my attention that it was thanks to this young man that this wedding took place at all." Yes, that's right. After all, if the bride had drowned, then we all might have gathered, but certainly would not have had fun. "Did you dig something up?" Jennifer flared up, turning to her new husband. "Are you trying to save money again?" "No, actually, it was an embarrassment," Kyle replied. "I guess I should have, though, now that I look at it. It was actually recommended to me by someone I know. I guess there was something I didn't know about the specificity of their humor." "But what about you, young man?" Meanwhile, the Toastmaster continued. "Do not be shy, go. Congratulate the happy family that is being created right in front of our eyes." Andrew slowly, as if overcoming some physical obstacle, climbed onto the stage, took the microphone in his hands, turned it around, as if not knowing how exactly it should be used. And then he finally squeezed out a few platitudes, but then suddenly decided to present the newlyweds with a song of his own performance. The lyrics were lyrical, about love that knows no barriers, and Andrew's voice was surprisingly good, and he sang beautifully, sensually. When he finished, the audience met him with thunderous applause. At that moment he became embarrassed, as if he realized, quickly gave the microphone to the Toastmaster, left the stage, and soon left the celebration. Kyle, intrigued by the guest's strange behavior, nevertheless found the strength to leave him alone, and was rewarded for his patience in the most unexpected way. In just a week, the answers to all his questions found him. Not in the form he had expected, though. Kyle had already finished his current business and was about to leave work when his cell phone rang. When he looked at the screen, he wasn't surprised. It displayed the number of a very old acquaintance of the investigator for especially important cases, with whom they had not communicated for many years. Bad thoughts began to creep into his head. "Hello, Tom, I haven't heard from you in 100 years. Are you just calling, or is it business? We haven't talked." "Sure," a serious voice answered him. "But not so much that you forget that I don't call for nothing." Kyle sighed heavily. "But surely there's something I can do to help," he asked, trying to keep his voice calm. "Or am I suspected of something? If the latter was true, you wouldn't have called, you'd have come in person." "Yeah, that's right. Look, it's about your recent wedding. One of the guests, actually." Kyle's heart sank. He had little doubt which guest he was talking about. A variety of thoughts began to creep into his head, from the fact that he'd been wrong to find this tramp and invite him to the wedding, to the certainty that Andrew couldn't be involved in anything criminal. Well, he did not look like a hardened criminal, especially such that he was interested in investigators, dealing with particularly serious crimes. You see, a video of a young man singing a touching love song has spread everywhere, his interlocutor continued. It has become very popular, and frankly speaking, deservedly so. Even I got a kick out of it, although it would seem that's not the point. We are interested in the performer, and on what occasion are you interested in him? But actually, I can't tell you that, answered the investigator. You just found someone to make a fool of. Well, listen, he is a suspect in a very old and serious case. Although, of course, it may not be him, but I'm pretty sure I can't be wrong. It was a high-profile case. Maybe you've heard of it. Anyway, there was a helicopter carrying gold from the mines up north. And this is your guest. Worked there as a pilot. Worked well for a long time, no complaints. Except on one of the flights, something went wrong. There was a terrible accident. The helicopter went down. Everyone on board is dead. Well, not all of them. They found 3 bodies, and the crew was 4 people. They've all been identified. Only the pilot was missing. Quite a lot of gold was missing. And you think that the pilot killed them all and escaped with the gold. Why would he do that? Kyle clarified. But I can't think of any other theory. In fact, I wanted to ask you this. How could we find him and talk to him? He must be a friend of yours, you know, but you know me. If he's innocent, he's got nothing to fear. Maybe it's not even the same person. It's very easy to find out nowadays. Yeah, Kyle thought irritably. You'll tell me anything to get me to give you the information you want. I can't help you with that, he said. Not that he's my friend. No contact. Where does he live? I have no idea. And in that case, how did he end up at your wedding? The investigator inquired ingratiatingly. Yes, by pure chance. You see, what's the matter? Just a month before the wedding, he saved his wife. She naturally got into an accident, flew the car into the river, and he pulled her out, pumped her up. So we invited him to thank him, so to speak. But he came. And Nancy gave it to Tony. Well, we'll check it out. And you, if you find out anything. Sure, Kyle answered briefly and hung up. He paced around the office, unsure of what he should do. What wasn't adding up in his head? For one thing, Andrew had made a very good impression on him. And it wasn't just the fact that he'd saved Jennifer, though that was important, of course. But would an experienced killer jump into cold water to help a complete stranger and risk being discovered? No, he'd just walk on by without any unpleasant consequences. Besides, gold, like you, Andrew, is vagrancy. And if, according to the investigator's version, he stole valuables worth a huge amount of money, it would have been enough to become a whole new person. Forge documents and go somewhere overseas and live a lifetime of luxury and self-indulgence. And again, no. Lives in some abandoned run-down house, along with an obviously picked-up dog. There's that dog again, by the way. They say dogs look like their owners, and this animal, for all its fierce appearance, was a calm and completely harmless creature. But there were, of course, arguments in favor of the other option. One argument, to be exact, was Andrew's strange behavior. He was clearly hiding from someone, probably from some serious people. Why not the police? And on the other hand, who says that the police are always right and never prosecute the innocent? In the end, Kyle decided he had only one right course of action. Go to Andrew's house right now and talk to him in person. Ask him what was going on, get some answers, and then decide what to do next. Somehow he didn't feel any danger to himself at all. Even though he'd been told that this man was probably a cold-blooded killer, he must not have wanted to believe it. As soon as he approached the house, however, Kyle realized he was too late. A huge black dog was lunging in front of the dilapidated building, seemingly distraught with grief. Andrew was nowhere to be found. Apparently, the cops had gotten ahead of him. Well, they certainly had a lot more resources to search than he did. The first time he'd looked for a strange stranger, Kyle had approached the dog and affectionately said a few meaningless words to him. The dog looked at him cross-eyed, growled menacingly, but then sniffed and obviously recognized him, came right up to him with sad eyes, sat down near his feet, and demanded to be stroked on the back of his neck. "Don't worry, cheer up," Kyle said. "Let's get your master out." He opened the car door and made an inviting gesture. The dog looked at him incredulously, but jumped in. On the way out, Kyle dialed his wife's number, wondering how he could best explain all this to her. But nothing good came to mind. Indeed, Kyle was a half-hour behind schedule. By the time he got the call from an old acquaintance, the police already knew the approximate area in which to search for the suspect. Combing through it and finding the abandoned house wasn't too difficult for them. Andrew had gone with them without resistance, asking only to be allowed to find someone to watch the dog, but even that was denied. At the police station, they immediately led him to a stern-looking interrogation. The investigator was clearly set against him. Andrew knew this type of person well. He had no goal of getting to the truth. He already had a picture in his head of what had happened, and if some facts contradicted, so much the worse for the facts. "Peter's Andrew Valerievich?" The investigator asked him sternly. "Yes, that's me," reluctantly admitted the suspect. What's the point of denying it? Saying that he just looks alike? He was confused with someone, does not know anything. Maybe 20 or 30 years ago it would have worked, but not now. DNA will quickly prove that he's the pilot who went missing after the helicopter crash, and it's only going to get worse. Andrew Valerievich, do you understand why we asked you here? But I wouldn't use the word invited, Andrew said caustically, but yes, I understand the reason for your interest in my person. Do you think I'm responsible for the death of 3 people crashed in the helicopter and the loss of a large amount of gold? Yes, well, you see, it's not difficult at all. The investigator suddenly smiled, already presenting another star on his epaulets. It's good that you cooperate with the investigation. It will count for something. Wait a minute, Andrew objected. I didn't confess to anything. I just stated the charges you could have brought against me, at your request, by the way. But I didn't say I actually did it. That's interesting, said the investigator. Then how do you explain what happened? Well, quite simply, Andrew replied. I was set up. There was no gold in the helicopter. We were transporting some garbage under the guise of it, but I found out about it after the crash. The bags burst open, and I saw what was really in them. The helicopter was damaged just before it went down. Apparently, they must have counted on someone being alive to take the fall, or some escaped convicts if they all died. It's the North, rough country, lots of criminals. It sounds very plausible, said the investigator, not hiding his skepticism. But if you are not guilty of anything, why have you been hiding all this time? Why not come to the police at once and tell everything as it was? Well, I must say, the crash didn't go without a trace for me, Andrew answered. I was injured a lot, lost my memory. Some locals found me, took me to the hospital. I lay there for a couple of months. I came out of there with no money, no ID. Who was I from? I couldn't remember anything, and I didn't know who needed me. So it turned out I was left with only one way out. I wandered around for a long time, changed cities. Then a dog came to me. That's when I started to remember. I don't know what that has to do with it. Maybe it doesn't. But the point is, it's been 2 years since my memory finally came back. Where would I go? Who'd believe me? I didn't want to go to jail, and I'd gotten used to the vagabond life. And I would have lived normally, not bothering anyone, if it wasn't for the wedding. That damned wedding. Of course, the investigator did not believe Andrew, and he went to the detention center to await trial, the outcome of which no one doubted. He even seemed to accept his fate, and was more concerned about the dog. But when the capture service arrived at his old house to take the dog to the shelter, they found no one, who had just finished his questioning and was about to call his old acquaintance Kyle again, but he was beaten to it. He turned on his cell phone, which he always turned off while working, and it was ringing off the hook with messages about the persistent attempts to reach him, followed by another call. Hello again, the investigator stretched into the receiver. Why are you worried about your fool? About whose place of residence you know nothing. This is a deliberate misleading of the investigation. What were you thinking? The cameras already show everything perfectly, he continued. And how did you look for him? And how did you meet him? Look, Tony, I don't believe Andrew could have killed anyone, Kyle said bluntly. You don't have to believe that. The facts are there. There's no conclusive evidence that he's innocent. The version he gave me is ridiculous. Do you have any proof of his guilt? Kyle asked. Well, think about it. Would a killer risk his life to save a stranger? People change, the investigator said philosophically, but that doesn't absolve them of responsibility for past crimes. Well, and the gold, he must have a lot of money. If he really committed a theft, what do you suspect him of? Why is he living like a bum in some abandoned shack? Who knows? Maybe he stole it, but he doesn't know where to sell it, or what to do with it. He didn't know. He's basically just a working man, didn't work with jewelry. That much money can make a man go crazy. It happens. And he got nothing out of it in the end. So much trouble, Kyle interrupted him. I'll give you some advice, though. Instead of trying to talk me down, talk to your friend. Kill him. Tell him that cooperating with the investigation is the best option for him. Tell him to tell it like it is. He'll repent. Show him where he hid the gold. I'm sure he's got it somewhere. He'll get credit for it. He'll get the minimum, and then he'll be out on parole for good behavior. That's the best option. What can I get you? I'll think about it, Kyle said dryly. He hung up the phone without saying goodbye. His insides were churning with rage. Now he was absolutely certain that poor Andrew had done nothing wrong. He was just in the wrong place at the wrong time. But it was that punishable? What proof do they have that he did it? Isn't there a presumption of innocence? He didn't take the wise advice, of course. Instead, he talked to some acquaintances and hired the best lawyer for Andrew. Of course, it had cost a lot of money. Nevertheless, he felt responsible for the unfortunate drifter. After all, it was Kyle's fault that he had come to his wedding, where he was eventually discovered. The lawyer turned out to be smart and well-versed in his work. At the trial, he convincingly argued that there was no reason to consider one version worse than the other. There was no evidence, witnesses, recordings from surveillance cameras in those places where the crime occurred. In addition, the version that the prosecution provided also had many unresolved problems. For example, how Andrew would have transported such a large amount of gold alone and hidden it. He wouldn't have had time to do it, given how quickly the scene of the tragedy arrived. Plus, the suspect went, and the fact that before the incident he was on a good account with his superiors. Responsible, hardworking, reliable. Albeit with some difficulty, Andrew was exonerated. He walked out of the courtroom a free man with no problems with the law, except he still had no home, no job, and no assets. How was he supposed to start this new life of his? He had no idea. "We should find one for starters," he said aloud, but more to himself than to anyone around him. "Don't," Kyle snapped back. "I took it from us the minute they took you away. I thought I'd have no trouble." Turned out to be a good animal. Obedient, doesn't run around the house, doesn't shit. "You bet," Andrew smiled. "I didn't just pick him up. I raised him the best I could, and it worked out great. I'll tell you. But think about it. Where are you going to take him? Will you wander the streets again? Or are you going to go back to your summer house? It's going to fall right on your heads. It's no good. But what else is left? Tell you what, come work for me. I can't pay much yet, but I'll make enough to live on. Plus, I'll rent you an apartment as an employee. That's good practice. We'll find one where they'll let your dog in." "It's kind of embarrassing. You've helped me so much already," Andrew mumbled. "I've only gotten you out of the story I got you into so far," Kyle countered. "And I still haven't thanked you for saving Jennifer's life. And believe me, I value her life very highly." "I don't even know how to do much of anything." Andrew was still hesitant. "Unless I can fly a helicopter. And that's probably not very good anymore. Skills are lost as machines improve. You'd have to retrain all the time. And I don't think you need a pilot." "Well, I don't need a pilot. But a driver, why not? I'm not in a position to turn the steering wheel myself. Can you drive a car?" "I do. I just need to renew my license. But that's no problem." And that was the deal. Andrew and the dog, as Kyle had promised, moved into a spacious apartment not far from the office. The salary, according to the newly minted driver, was even higher than he deserved. In short, life began to get better. He hardly even remembered what he had left behind. There was only one thing that made him sad. Once upon a time long ago, he had a fiancée. Where is she now? With whom? He didn't know. She'd probably given up on him as soon as he'd been blamed for the helicopter crash. He didn't blame her, but he was in no hurry to reconnect. Why? She's probably got her own life, and his feelings for her had long since faded. However, memories more and more often led Andrew to think that he lacked a woman's warmth. By duty, he drove Kyle everywhere, but primarily to various business negotiations. Usually he waited for his boss in the car, but sometimes he was offered a seat somewhere near the reception desk. As a rule, he politely declined. He felt a bit awkward in posh interiors of expensive offices or fashionable restaurants, but once he decided to agree. The thing is that to the invitation. It was this woman who captivated Andrew that day, when he didn't even have time for breakfast. He was engaged in some mundane and completely unnecessary conversation with his secretary, when a woman, the future business partner of his boss, came out of the meeting room on her own business. By the corner of his eye, he managed to notice the third participant of these negotiations and froze at half a word. Of course, time had done its work, but he could not fail to recognize these people, especially the woman. The very woman with whom he had spent so many days and nights, and whose face he knew better than his own. After all, she had been his fiancée then, in his past life. But her companion in that life was his immediate superior, who had sent Andrew on that ill-fated flight. How vividly Andrew remembered that he was not the one who was supposed to fly that day. But the boss asked him very much, literally begged him, saying that the task was too important, and he could not entrust it to just anyone, only to the best employee. Now it became clear that the employee was either to be killed or imprisoned for life. It seems that these two would be satisfied with either option. Andrew had no doubts about who had set him up with that shipment, and who had gotten all the gold they were trying to pin on him. Besides, he had seen the couple trading and exchanging some jewelry when they came here to Los Angeles. In short, they were clearly in a romantic relationship. What he hadn't seen then was their faces. But now that he recognized them, everything fell into place. In front of him were the culprits of all his troubles. Andrew took exactly as long as it took Jennifer's ex-fiancée to complete the business she had left the office for. He had literally burst into the room after her, and without realizing what he was doing, he had attacked his former boss with his fists, shouting accusations and insults. It took a lot of effort for Kyle to pull his driver away from the potential partners. "Is this how you guys negotiate now?" the injured man inquired. "We certainly didn't agree on everything, but not to this extent." "I apologize for this terrible incident," Kyle Chief began. "You don't have to have any dealings with them." Andrew interrupted him. "They're crooks and murderers besides." "You'll have to believe me." "Calm down, son," Kyle said. As he left the office, he added reluctantly, "We'll deal with you later." Andrew obeyed. Back in the car, he tried to calm the trembling in his hands and wipe the tears from his eyes. The chief returned 10 minutes later and was, to say the least, not in the best of spirits. "The negotiations are blown," he almost shouted. "I had so counted on these people being very respectable. By the way, they were supposed to invest in my project. I hope I was able to persuade them to consider it after all. Still, nothing is guaranteed. Explain to me what's gotten into you." Nervous and stammering, occasionally breaking down into hysterical sobs, Andrew tried to tell me exactly what had happened. Kyle listened to him without interrupting, but, as it seemed to the driver, didn't really believe his words. And you're absolutely sure it's definitely them? He asked skeptically. I've spent so many nights in the same bed with this woman. Pardon me. Wouldn't I recognize it? And the boss hasn't changed much. Well, let's say, Kyle said slowly, but are you sure they're the ones who set you up? Who else? It's all there on the surface. That's what an investigator I know used to say about a man who was later found completely innocent in a court of law. Does that ring a bell? That's not the same thing, Andrew said. I think it's the same thing. Kyle cut him off. The same baseless accusations based on your own prejudices. We don't know what happened to that helicopter, period. Furthermore, I can certainly understand your feelings, but we also don't know if she really cheated on you, even though you're now convinced otherwise. But no, Andrew began. But cut off Kyle, this conversation is over. And if you ever allow yourself to pull a stunt like this again, I'm sorry, but I'm going to have to fire you. Friendship is friendship, but I'm not going to let anyone ruin my business. For a while it was as if they had decided to forget what had happened. As before, Andrew drove the chief to negotiations, but he never saw his former fiancée or her new husband again. He even allowed himself to hope that Kyle had heeded his words after all, and decided to look for more reliable partners. Very soon he had to find out that he was sorely mistaken. One Monday morning, when he had habitually picked up his boss to drive him to work, he had found only Jennifer at home. To say she was upset was an understatement. She was in a state of near panic. Went to negotiate out of town somewhere Friday night. What negotiation? Andrew was taken aback. I mean, he let me go early on Friday. Who drove him? He drove himself, Jennifer said. He said he didn't want you there. Jesus, Andrew whispered, starting to realize. Wasn't it with the Vasquez couple? He's had talks with them, Jennifer retorted, looking at him with some hopefulness even. I've contacted them before. They say it went well and he went home the same day. They never saw him again. And he didn't make it home either. For the next few days, Andrew, along with Kyle's father, literally lived at Jennifer's house and supported her as best he could. He didn't know how to tell her the terrible truth, the reality of which he was almost certain. It was unlikely they would ever see Kyle alive again. His suspicions were confirmed by the fact that the chief's firm had somehow ended up in the Vasquez family's control. Allegedly, Kyle signed some kind of power of attorney for them. And now, while he was missing, it was they who were supposed to run the business. The only thing Andrew didn't know was how to prove his suspicions. For a while, though, he had bigger problems. The very secretary who sat in the office at Vasquez's pointed at him as a possible culprit of the disappearance of the chief. She said if he was lashing out at people out of the blue, maybe he killed the chief. And then there's the old accusation. The court acquitted him, of course, but it left a residue. All the police wanted to do was close the case as quickly as possible. It was Jennifer's intercession that saved Andrew, and also the fact that he had a great relationship with his neighbors, which he kindly always helped in one way or another. Immediately, several people, having learned of his distress, agreed to testify. Many saw him walking with his dog on the evening of the ill-fated Friday. So even those charges against him had to be dropped. Nevertheless, Andrew had to spend a few days in the police station. When he came out, he was surprised to find that he could not pull himself together. Finally, he was able to tell her his version of events so they could figure out together what to do next. Jennifer believed him unconditionally, but had no idea how to prove it herself. Besides, as horrible as it might sound, she had bigger problems to deal with. She had to fight for their business somehow, so she wouldn't be left without a livelihood, especially since Jennifer wasn't just responsible for herself anymore. Shortly before Kyle's disappearance, the couple had learned that they were expecting a child. I understand something about these things. Of course, she shared with Andrew, but still not as well as I'd like. Most of the people who could help have only communicated with Kyle. He still has all the contacts. So maybe you and Victor should reach out, Andrew suggested to her. You seem to have a good relationship with the firm. They apparently don't, but they have experience and connections. That's right. Jennifer slapped her forehead with the palm of her hand. How did I not realize that right away? Come on, you've got so much on your plate right now. So they divided up the duties. Jennifer, with the help of Kyle's parents, began suing Vasquez over the business. Andrew, on the other hand, went in search of his missing boss. He simply drove every road he could find in the area where the negotiations had taken place, interviewing people, reviewing camera footage that some of the concerned owners of roadside establishments agreed to show him. It took about a month to get on the trail. The camera lens of one of the cafes still got the car he was looking for. Now the directions of the search were clearer. Andrew searched literally every millimeter within a radius of several kilometers from this place, and finally he succeeded. He found a remote pond somewhere on the edge of the forest. The place was quite picturesque and would have attracted tourists if not for the location. It was too far not only from civilization, but even from remote villages and dacha settlements. Apparently, that's why the criminals chose this corner. Instead of crowds of vacationers on the surface of the water with sadly visible flooded car, Kyle, it wasn't the first time Andrew had dived into an icy body of water. Then again, he hadn't hesitated for a second before doing so. The car was empty, but miraculously the video recorder was intact. He waded ashore, clutching the precious find in his hands. Of course, it's not certain that the tape will serve as proof, but now there was at least some hope. In any case, a flooded car is something. At least now the police would have to move to find out what had happened to its owner. With these thoughts, Andrew called the police. While he waited for them to arrive, he decided to watch the tape recorder. It was hard to do, and the feelings after watching it were very ambiguous. On the one hand, Andrew now knew for sure that he had in his hands the perfect proof of Vasquez's guilt. It was the former chief sat behind the wheel of this car for the last time, while on the back seat was lying tied-up owner. What's more, it turns out Kyle's recorder was somehow very advanced. It recorded audio too. So basically the perps were having fun discussing all their machinations on tape. Fortunately, it cut off shortly before the car, apparently, together with its helpless owner, went into the pond. We should be happy. The criminals will finally be punished. Except it's not going to bring Kyle back. And if he were less stubbornly self-righteous, he wouldn't be Kyle. This whole story would have turned out differently. With a heavy heart, Andrew gave the tape to the police and drove to Jennifer's house. Now that the police have all the evidence they can get, it's going to turn out that you were arrested, convicted, and sent to jail for a very long time. And not just for Kyle's death. In fact, in that tape they discussed their previous crime as well, as Andrew believed. He himself had continued to live with Jennifer, and afterward with her young son. The boy must have considered him as his father from the first days. After some time, the couple decided to get married. At first, just to avoid explaining to everyone how it happened that they lived together and raised a child, but are neither spouses, nor even just in love. But over time, their friendship, fueled by common troubles, began to grow into something more. When their son went to school, they were already beyond any doubt full-fledged spouses. All the troubles and sorrows were not that forgotten, but remained only a pale shadow in the distant past. Now both of them were absolutely happy, and their family had their own traditions. For example, every Sunday they went to the park together with their son, and an elderly but still vigorous dog. On one of these walks, they noticed a beggar throwing a begging bowl. Before they could think of anything, two things happened at once. First, the son, who grew up a kind and sympathetic guy, came up to the poor man to give him his bun. Secondly, the dog, noticing the vagrant, did not ignore him like all strangers. No, he came wagging his tail and tried to lick his face. That's when Andrew managed to get a proper look at him. "Kyle," he exclaimed, amazed. Jennifer was dumbfounded as well. "Do you know me?" the beggar asked, hopefully, petting the dog. "I apologize for asking such a question. I woke up one day on the shore of a pond very far from here. What happened before that? I don't know." Andrew couldn't find the strength to answer, tears glistening in his eyes. He rushed to his old friend and put his arms around him. "It's all right," he said. "We'll help you remember. It's so good to have you alive." Now it was Andrew's turn to rent a place for Kyle to live and assist him in any way he could. Eventually, in familiar surroundings, the memory began to slowly return. And then they all ran into a problem that no one had thought of. Kyle, only after realizing who he was, realized that his wife was now with someone else, who was also raising his son as his own. And naturally, this was a hard blow to him. For some time, he even let himself into all sorts of bad behavior, drinking, came to Andrew's house, made ugly scenes. The spouses did not fight and did not condemn him. On the contrary, continued to support. And even the son could somehow explain that the uncle has a difficult period in life, but it will pass, and everything will be as good as before. And it did. And just a couple months later, one day, Kyle showed up on their doorstep, completely sober and looking very guilty. "Friends, I'm sorry," he said simply. "I've been gone for almost 8 years. Of course, you've had your own lives going on. I shouldn't have reacted so strongly to it." "That's all right," Andrew replied. "It's all right now, isn't it? You're back with us." "Yes," Jennifer added. "You've always been a little impulsive, so it's no surprise. We've been waiting for you to come to your senses. There's only one serious question." "What's that?" Kyle wondered. "Business," Andrew said briefly. "We've made a lot of progress over the years, but at least a third of what we have is rightfully yours." "Oh," Kyle said, "well, you and your business. I don't want to get a quiet job as a janitor or something. I'm done being an entrepreneur for the rest of my life. It's a dangerous business." In the end, they agreed that the couple would send Kyle a certain amount of money every month and thus return to him as part of the business. That suited everyone. Kyle himself, tired of the hustle and bustle of city life, decided to go to the village. He found a suitable village, and surprisingly, there was even a house for sale. However, when he arrived to inspect it, the look of the structure seemed to him very depressing. A woman sitting in a wheelchair watched for a long time, and then she drove up and started a conversation. "I don't be too sure about this house," she said. "It looks so bad on the outside. And believe me, it's even worse on the inside. You can't tell how bad it is. And that's why they're selling it so cheap." "It's a shame," Kyle said. "I liked your village. I wanted to live here. I don't see any other houses for sale." "You know what?" Jennifer said. "The morning's the wiser. But where would you go at night now? Stay here. We'll figure out what to do in the morning." They got to talking to this woman, whose name was Jennifer too. She used to be a milkmaid. Yeah, she got hurt once by an out-of-control bull. Since then, she'd been living on her own with the help of kind neighbors. But of course, her house was in a bit of a state of disrepair. At first, Kyle helped out with little things. Then he decided to stay and did a full-scale renovation. Then he broke up the vegetable garden, and eventually he found the right doctors and paid for Jennifer's expensive surgery to repair her lower spine. Then another 6 months of hard rehabilitation, during which he was always there for her. And finally, she was able to take her first step. The farm, meanwhile, was growing. Kyle bought the little house with the lot and attached it to Jennifer's house. He started to set up the farm, started some livestock, even hired employees. In short, he went back into business, but in a different business. And a couple of years later, there was a noisy village wedding, to which, of course, invited Andrew and Jennifer and their children, and even the dog. And the bride was already dancing with the groom, even better than many young and healthy people. The passenger train slowed down. Bridges, houses, traffic lights flashed in the compartment window. Looking into the compartment, the conductress said, "Approaching, parking 2 minutes." The man put his things in a bag and left the compartment. Passengers with suitcases and travel bags were crowding in the aisle, preparing to leave. "Do you know where you can find a hotel in this city?" the elegantly dressed man asked the conductress. "I don't know," she replied. "Ask the cab drivers, they know." "Thank you. Have a good trip, and all the best to you." The man got down on the platform and looked around. Night had already fallen on the city. The station building was faintly lit by lanterns. He passed by, turned the corner, but did not see Kate with checkers on the roof. At a loss, the man stopped under the taxi stand sign. He had come to this unfamiliar city on very important business. Now he didn't know how long he would be here, but he was determined, planning to finish everything quickly so that his life's dream would finally come true. The man noticed a car, which, shining its headlights on the wet asphalt, was moving in his direction. He waved his hand and the car stopped. "I'd like to find a hotel to spend the night," the stranger said to the driver, who noticed the strange accent with which the man spoke. Was he not from around here? "Get in. I'll give you a ride," the driver offered. "You won't get there on foot. It's too far." The man sat down on the back seat and thanked the driver. "But I don't give rides for free," he warned. Yes, I have money, don't worry." The passenger put his hand into his coat pocket and took out a colored bill. He handed it to the bomber. "And there is no Russian money?" the driver asked the passenger. "Unfortunately, no, I have just arrived, but if there is somewhere you can exchange it, I would be very happy. I only have euros with me, and I need rubles." The driver looked at the passenger carefully through the rearview mirror. Odd, even a little ridiculous, unsure, he had taken out a packet of euros and was now showing it to him, a stranger he was seeing for the first time in his life. Crazy or just plain stupid? Usually business travelers would kill themselves for the last penny and even ask cab drivers for a check to account for the trip, but this. "I know where there is an exchange office nearby. Let's go," said the driver, and the car rustled its wheels on the asphalt. After a while, the driver slowed down and, without turning off the engine, said, "Over there on the corner, you see it's lit up. They change currency there. Go. I'll wait here." The passenger got out of the car, leaving his travel bag on the back seat, and headed in the direction indicated. The man did not hear the driver, quietly got out after him, and, trying not to stomp, followed the dark shadow on his heels. Not reaching a few meters to the exchange, the stranger stumbled, the laces on his boots untied. He bent down to tidy his shoes. Suddenly something heavy fell on his head. From the impact, a severe pain spread all over his head, and then came the darkness. The new day began with rain. A nasty, fall drizzle sowing on the ground like a sieve. Its drops dripped down the window, making me feel sad. This fall it rained especially often. It was as if nature was tired of the summer heat and drought, and now it was trying its best to recharge itself with life-giving moisture. Megan stared out the window, gazing out through the streams of rain running down the glass. Sam had just fallen asleep. The 5-year-old girl wrapped a piece of bread in a clean handkerchief, dipped it in the sweet tea, and brought it to the lips of the 6-month-old. "Here, suck the bread," she said to her brother in a quiet voice. "There is nothing else. Here, Mom will come and feed you." The child grabbed the roll with his mouth and began to suck zealously. The girl stroked his head. Gradually, the baby calmed down and fell asleep. Why hadn't she thought of giving him some bread soaked in tea before? She could have slept herself if he had calmed down and not cried all night. Megan looked out the window, standing on a stool. Her mother had left as early as yesterday. She still wasn't home. Aunt Kate from next door showed up in the yard. The woman put the doormats on the bench and began to dust them, taking one by one and putting the clean ones in a neat pile. The girl watched Aunt Kate. The kind neighbor sometimes fed Megan, bringing her from the yard to her house. When her mother gave birth to Sam, the girl stayed with the kind woman for a few days. Those were such happy days. Aunt Kate's house was always clean and warm. On the table was a vase with cookies and candy, and for dinner the neighbor cooked delicious meat cutlets with pasta. Aunt Kate also bought Megan pencils and a sketchbook, and in the evenings they drew together. The girl every time tried to depict on a sheet of paper her father, mother, and herself next to her brother. It didn't always work. That daddy was sad, that mom was ugly, and still she liked to visit her neighbor. At the end of the yard, Mom showed up. Megan rejoiced, pressed her face against the window pane. Her mother walked staggeringly, struggling to move her legs. Her hair was disheveled and her cloak was stained, as if she'd rolled in mud. "Chiara, you're drunk again." Aunt Kate shouted at her. "Shame on you." After all, a young mother, 2 children, began to shame the drunken woman neighbor. "Leave me alone, you don't get to judge me," Megan's mother snapped at her and strode unsteadily toward her driveway. "Oh no," the neighbor rushed over to her. "You're going to listen to me today, you asshole. Sam's been screaming all night. A 6-month-old baby in the arms of a 5-year-old girl for 24 hours. What are you trying to do? Kill the kids?" "Fuck off. It's none of your business." "Maybe it's none of my business, but I'll call the police and the guardianship office, so you'll know when the kids are taken away. Maybe then you'll get your head on straight and start thinking." "What?" screamed the drunken woman. "And you try to call, I'll burn your apartment with all your stuff." Oh, you scared me. Don't sleep in a drunken frenzy." The neighbor came close to the woman, shook her by the shoulders. "Grace, look what you look like. Look what you've turned into. You used to be a beautiful woman, smart, hard-working, and now you're just a slut and an alcoholic. There's no other way to call her." "Piss off," I said. The woman pushed her neighbor away and entered the entrance of a 2-story wooden barrack. Sighing, Megan got off the stool and walked down the hallway. Now her mother would fall into the house, fall to the floor, and have to drag her to bed, or she'd be lying in the hallway, unable to get up. Just as long as she didn't wake Sam, she thought. For as long as Megan could remember, her mother had always been caring and loving. She worked as a nurse at the hospital. From work, she would run to the daycare center to pick up her daughter, and then they would rush home together. Mom would cook dinner and Megan would twirl around her in the kitchen with her dolls. When Dad came home from work, Mom would set dinner on the table. Dad always joked a lot. He was a very kind man, and he loved Mom and Megan. Most of all, the girl loved it when he rolled her on his shoulders. And they also went to the yard together and Daddy would swing her on the swings. Then one day Megan heard some noise in the big room and came running to see what was going on. Her dad was twirling her mom around the room in his arms and kissing all the while. "Put it down." "I'm getting dizzy already," she asked, laughing. Dad put Mom on the couch and squatted down and stroked her belly. "Megan, you're going to have a baby brother soon," the man said, seeing that the daughter was looking at her and her mother with surprise. The girl sat down next to Grace. "Is he in your belly?" she asked her mother, but she did not answer, only smiled. "He's in my belly," my dear Daddy said. "Soon he will appear, and you will play with him, ride him in a stroller in the yard, feed him from a spoon." "No way." Megan pouted her lips. "I like to draw, but how could he?" "He can't until he's little, and then you'll teach him," said her father. After a while, Grace's belly began to bulge, growing bigger and bigger and bigger, turning into a huge ball. One day, the father found his daughter crying bitterly in her room. "Megan, honey, what's wrong? Did someone hurt you?" He worried. Daddy took the girl's face in his palms and looked carefully into her eyes. "Tell me who hurt you, and I will punish him." "My brother," the girl cried, sobbing. "What brother?" The father did not understand. "The one in Mommy's belly," Megan persisted. "How could he hurt you? He wasn't born yet." The man stroked his daughter's hair, trying to calm her down. "Let him not be born." Megan smeared tears on her cheeks with her fists. Why not? What are you talking about? Don't you want a brother? No, I don't. Look how big Mommy's belly is. It'll burst like a balloon and she'll die. Megan sobbed again. Her father looked surprised at her crying daughter, but then he laughed and hugged her. Silly girl, nothing will happen to your mom, he said. You, too, lived in her tummy at first. Mommy gave birth to you and now we are all together. The girl looked at her daddy incredulously. Is she sure she won't die when the baby brother is born? She asked. Of course she won't die, little girl. Don't even worry. A month later, together with Daddy, they took Mommy and baby brother from the hospital. It was a very happy and joyful day. The day before, Daddy vacuumed the carpets and dusted the house, and Megan followed him like a tail. Are you going to swing him on the swing too? Asked her father. And on your shoulders you will roll? Will you throw him up to the ceiling and catch him? Megan, he is still very young, and at first he will always only sleep and drink milk. And play. Megan didn't understand. When he grows up, then he will play. Don't rush the time, baby. Mom came out of the hospital with a blue package. The father ran up to her, took the baby in his arms, and handed the mother a bouquet of flowers. He lifted the corner of the blanket and showed Megan the baby brother. How ugly, exclaimed the girl. Is he going to be so red and wrinkled for the rest of his life? The parents laughed. At home, everything revolved around the little brother. In the morning, her father took Megan to kindergarten, and in the evening, when he brought her home, the first thing she did was to run to the crib where Sam was sleeping. She would take his hand, run her little fingers over it, stroke his tummy. Her mom wouldn't let her hold her brother in her arms, but she gave Megan a bottle of formula, and the girl fed the baby, saying, "Eat every last drop, then you will grow big and strong." One day, Daddy didn't come to pick up Megan at the kindergarten. All the children had already been taken away, and she was playing alone on the playground, all the time looking toward the gate. But there was no sign of her father. When it was already dark, the teacher took the girl home. The door was opened by a neighbor, Aunt Kate. Megan ran into the apartment, rushed as usual to the crib where Sam lay. The women in the hallway talked quietly about something and the caregiver left, and then Mom came back. Her face was tearful. She collapsed helplessly on the couch and sobbed. Aunt Kate stroked the woman's hair and shoulders, soothing her, saying, "What a grief, Lord. How can you be alone now with 2 orphans?" Megan's dad died in the service. He was a fireman. That day, a vegetable warehouse caught fire. It was dry and windy in May, and the flames spread quickly through the building, covering the walls and roof. One of the floor joists collapsed, crushing the man, and when he was pulled outside, he was already dead. When Megan's mother was informed of the terrible tragedy that happened to her husband, she completely lost her mind, thrashing around like a madwoman, screaming and sobbing. The EMTs had to try their best to give her some shots to calm her down. On the day of her father's funeral, a neighbor's Aunt Kate was at home with Megan and Sam. While the baby slept, she set the plates on the table. "Bring glasses," baby Aunt Kate asked the girl, "or people will come, and we haven't set the table yet." "Why are people coming?" Megan asked naively. "It's customary. When a person goes to the next world, they bury him, and then remember him." The woman tried to explain. "What do you mean, memorialized?" The girl persisted, putting the glasses on the table. "It means that they eat, drink Kiesel, and remember the deceased with a kind word. And we in the kindergarten, too, they give us Kiesel. Are we remembering someone, too?" Aunt Kate looked sadly at the girl. Megan, who was bright beyond her years, waited for her answer. The woman hugged a little girl to her and secretly brushed away a tear that rolled down her cheek. "My poor girl, life is complicated, and it's hard for me to explain everything to you. Just remember that Papa loved you very much, and will always and always watch from the cloud how you live. And he will also watch how friendly and smart you and your baby brother are growing up. So you never leave Sam." Megan didn't understand anything the neighbor said, but she decided she would help her mom with everything, so that her dad would see it on his cloud and praise her daughter. Megan's mother, Shiara, was taking the death of her husband very hard. She strongly loved him since the school bench, believed that fate long ago decided everything for them and united them into one whole. When her husband was gone, he began to drink. At first she drank in the evenings after putting the children to bed. She sat in the kitchen with a bottle of vodka and a shot glass, drank and cried, remembering such a short, full of happiness and love family life. And then some people began to appear in the house. They and Grace drank together, yelled, sometimes fought. When her mother didn't pick Megan up from kindergarten, the teacher brought the girl home and said, "Run and I'll wait for you to come inside." Often the door to the apartment was locked from the inside. Megan would spend hours pounding her fists on the plywood paneling and screaming, "Mom, open up, it's me." Megan, her mother, was either asleep, drunk on vodka, or partying in the kitchen with her friends. Once home, Megan would sit next to Sam's crib and talk to him. "You don't have to be afraid," she told her brother, who looked at the girl with blue eyes. "Our mom is just a little sick. You'll see she'll get better, and everything will be like before." Megan learned to make her own formula, and when she wasn't, she heated a bottle of store-bought milk in a pot of hot water. Days, weeks, months went by, and Ciara never stopped drinking. On the contrary, the woman now began to disappear from the house for days at a time. She would return drunk and out of her mind, and most often, as soon as she walked through the door, she would collapse on the floor and lie there until she came to her senses. One morning, Megan walked into the kitchen. Her mother was washing dishes. It seemed to the girl that it had become the same. There were no bottles and shot glasses anywhere. The kitchen table was clean, and even the gingerbread was in a plate. "Mommy, we need to feed Sam," said the girl. "Now, my good girl, I'll heat up the milk and give it to my brother." Her mother poured milk from the bag into a clean bottle and set it to heat up on the water bath. "Do you want some tea, daughter?" "Pour, please." The girl sat down on a stool by the table and took a gingerbread. She thought only about one thing: if only no one had come to visit her mother and brought vodka. Finally, everyone was fed. Ciara started to get dressed. "Are you leaving, Mommy?" Megan asked fearfully. She knew Mommy would leave and then come back with a bottle, and she would be lying around drunk again. "No, honey, we're all going to go for a walk to the park together," the woman replied. "Get dressed and put a blanket in the stroller." Rejoicing, Megan started pulling clothes out of the closet, got dressed, and then rolled the stroller into the middle of the room to prepare a place for her baby brother. She didn't notice her mother lurking in the kitchen, pouring alcohol into a glass and knocking it over, wrinkling her nose a little. The woman stared out the window for a few minutes and then did it again, splashing more vodka into the glass. Grace went back into the room to the children. Megan was already dressed, and Sam was lying in his crib. His mother moved him to the couch and dressed him in a beautiful knit suit with an embroidered bunny on the chest. Then the woman went to the sideboard and took something out of a crystal candy bowl. Here she held it out to her daughter, put it on and never take it off. Megan was holding a braided string with a small wooden horseshoe hanging from it. She obediently put the thing around her neck, but still asked, "What is this, Mother?" In her mother's hands, she saw exactly the same pendant on a braided cord. She was running her finger along the wooden horseshoe, whispering something quietly, as if she were talking to someone. The girl tugged Grace's skirt. "Mommy, what is this? Why do I have to wear this shoelace?" The woman squatted down in front of her daughter, looked her in the eyes with her alcohol-fogged gaze, and spoke. "These two identical pendants your daddy made a long time ago when he and I started dating. He had one and I had the other. And now I want you and Sam to have them, okay?" Megan nodded, though she didn't understand anything. "But since Mommy said so, let that horseshoe lanyard hang around her neck. Especially since Daddy made it." Grace put the second pendant around her son's neck and hid it under her knit sweater. It was warm and dry outside. Ciara rolled the stroller in front of her, and Megan walked beside her. Sometimes she skidded forward, bouncing, spinning. The girl couldn't remember a time when she and her mom had walked together. "Wait here," her mother said, and put the stroller next to the entrance to the store. "I'll be right back." When the mother came out, she had a bag with a bottle and a Plomber ice cream in her hands, which the woman handed to her daughter. They took another walk in the park. Ciara bought a ticket for the merry-go-round. Megan waved cheerfully to her mother as she sat on the horse, and the mother walked beside her, rolling a stroller with a sleeping Sam in front of her. Then her mother sat Megan on a bench, put the stroller next to her, and gave her a handful of candy. "Stay here and don't go anywhere," the mother told her daughter. "If she wakes up, there's a bottle of milk in the stroller pocket. Do you understand me?" Megan nodded. She watched her mother walk away down the park alley for a while, and then she was distracted by the children playing ball on the playground. She wanted to run around with them too, but Megan couldn't move away from the stroller her brother was sleeping in. Time passed and her mom was gone. Passers-by sometimes came up to the 5-year-old girl wondering why she was alone with an infant. "Where are your parents?" Unfamiliar uncles and aunts asked. "My mom will come soon, she went away for a minute," the girl answered. But Ciara was still gone. There were fewer and fewer people in the park. Sam woke up and cried. Megan wheeled the stroller back and forth next to the bench to calm her brother, while she stared at the end of the alley, wondering when her mother's figure would appear. The girl gave Sam milk from a bottle. After he had eaten, he sucked the edge of the diaper in his hands and looked at his sister, who was ready to burst into tears. Finally, she stood up determinedly and wanted to leave the park. "Shouldn't we go home? Mom's probably there," she thought. But at the same moment, she sat down on the bench again. The girl was accustomed to obeying, so she decided, since her mother said to wait here, then she should wait. She took out a candy from her pocket, as suddenly she heard a voice. "Whose girl are you?" An elderly man with a broom in his hand stood next to the stroller. "Mommy's." Megan answered timidly. She was tired, very hungry and upset by her mother's long absence. "Why are you sitting here all alone?" A park worker, who appeared to be a janitor or a watchman, asked. "My mom and my brother and I went for a walk, and then she left and said she'd be here soon. I'm waiting and waiting, and she's not here, and then all the tension, worry, and fear came out in a flood of tears." Megan cried and Sam cried after her. Come on," the older man sat down next to her on the bench and stroked her hair. "Come on, don't get all wet. We'll find your mom. How long has she been gone?" "I don't know." The girl kept sobbing. The man looked at her, thinking, scratched the back of his head with his hand, and then said, "Come on, let's go. I know where we can find your missing mother." He added, "Come on, don't be afraid." He rolled the stroller down the alley with one hand and held Megan's hand with the other. They came to a small wooden building at the back of the park. The man put a broom at the entrance and guided the girl inside, while he rolled the stroller in with the baby and shouted softly, "Claire, come here." A woman in her 50s came out at the man's call. She was dressed plainly, with her hair in a bun at the back of her head and thick lensed glasses on her nose. "What do you want?" "Look, I was walking down the alley to close the gate to the park, and on the bench she was sitting with a stroller, rocking a baby. She says she's waiting for her mother, but I've been watching them for a long time. They came to the park at lunchtime, and have been sitting there all day." The woman scrutinized Megan, then shifted her gaze to the boy who was grunting and grunting in the stroller. "Are they lost?" she asked. "No, we were waiting for Mommy," Megan answered, calming down a little. "She said she'd be back soon, but she didn't show up." The woman bent over the stroller and pulled out the baby. "Oh my God, he's all wet and stuffed," she exclaimed, feeling that the boy's onesies and blouse were wet and dirty. "Do you have anything to change him into?" Megan bent down, and under the stroller on the lattice partition was a cloth bag containing a change of clothes, a diaper, and a pair of pants. She handed it to the woman. "Call the authorities, Greg," she said, undressing the child on the table where there were mugs and papers. "What's there to say?" Greg didn't understand. "As it is, just say that you found children in the park." "Ugh, that's the last thing we need." The man cursed. "I thought I'd have a good night's sleep or watch TV. There, and took a cup, because my old lady at home does not give a shot to drink. And here. Holy shit, such a situation is emerging. Now I'll have to testify all night, where I took the children, who they are, where the mother disappeared. And what do I know?" Continuing to grumble, Greg went to the phone and picked it up. "Hello, this is from the City Park of Culture and Recreation. My name is Greg. I found some children in the park. They are sitting here. An older girl and a very young boy. Of course, we'll be waiting for you." The man hung up. They said to wait, he said to Claire, who looked at him questioningly. "Where are we going to go now? We're not going to kick them out into the night." Soon the police entered the room, a man and a young girl in uniform. Megan stared at them. She knew the militia took bad people away. She didn't understand why these men had come for her and her brother. The policeman questioned Claire and Greg, then said, "We're taking them away. If the woman, the children's mother, shows up, tell us. and tell her that the kids were taken to the 36th police station. The park workers nodded. They said, of course, we'll do everything as it should be done. Marinka wanted to cry from fear. She felt a lump coming up to her throat. She held on with all her might. She was put in the back seat of the car, and the girl in uniform sat next to her, holding Sam in her arms. At the police station, Megan was asked various questions at length. Where is your mom? What's her name? Where does she work? Where do you live? But the girl could not answer anything. She didn't know the address. She only said that Daddy died, and Mom used to work at the hospital. But she doesn't go to work now because she has to take care of Sam. Do you and your brother have grandparents? The policewoman asked her. No, just Aunt Kate, Megan replied. She comes to us when Mom is ... and brings us food. I see the girl pressed her lips and looked meaningfully at her colleague, who, sitting at the table, was drawing up a protocol. Another socially dysfunctional family. Call the guardianship. Someone from the Department of Juvenile Affairs will determine. And yes, call the duty officer. Let him put in the summary of incidents and send to other departments. If the woman's a drinker, maybe she's out on the street somewhere. Megan was tired. She wanted to sleep, and her stomach rumbled unpleasantly with hunger. The girl handed her a glass of tea and a cookie. After a while, Megan fell into a shallow, disturbing dream in which she saw her mother. She was walking down an alley in the park, getting farther and farther away. The girl wanted to run after her, but her legs were cotton, not moving at all. Megan woke up when the room became very noisy. Strangers were talking about something, pulling out some papers, writing something on them. Then they took Sam and left. Don't worry, said the uniformed girl. Soon they will come for you. The girl didn't understand who was coming for her. Most of all, she was worried that Sam was not around. Her mom would scold her that she had lost her brother. In the morning, Megan was brought to the orphanage. First, she was examined by a doctor. Then some aunt took the girl by the hand and took her to the shower room, washed her and gave her clean underwear, a flannel robe and tights. Get dressed and come with me. I'll feed you, said the woman. Are you hungry? The girl nodded her head. In the spacious dining room, where the nanny led her, there were several small tables with stools. Just like our kindergarten, Megan thought. She sat down at the table, on which the nanny placed a glass of cocoa, semolina, and a bun. Eat, soon all the boys will wake up and come to breakfast. Then you'll get acquainted. The nanny stroked the girl's head, sighed another orphan. What kind of mothers are these who don't need their own children? When a bunch of children rushed into the dining room, hurriedly taking seats at the tables, Megan approached the nanny and asked, "Where's my baby brother?" "How should I know?" The woman shrugged her shoulders. "They probably took him to the orphanage. He's still very young." Megan didn't know what an orphanage was, but she knew that Sam was gone, and that made her chest feel cold, sad, and scared. Megan's 6-month-old baby brother was lying on a changing table in the office of Jessica Smith, the head of the infant home. Her assistant Clara was feeding the boy formula from a bottle. Leaning over the baby, she was saying, "Eat, sweetie, he's hungry. He's so hungry, he's yapping." I don't understand what these moms lack. Jessica Smith was indignant. How many years I've been working in an orphanage, and every time they bring such abandoned children, my heart bleeds. You don't say. He's a sweet little boy, Clara nodded her head. Blue eyes, blonde hair.
He's healthy too. The doctor said after the examination that he had no health problems, that he was developing in accordance with his age. But his mother abandoned him, and where? In the street.
You're right. She could have brought it to the institution and given it up honestly. What if something happened to the kid in the park? What a thing to leave your baby with your 5-year-old sister.
I'd sterilize those mothers, Clara, so they couldn't have any more babies. You think she'll grieve, come running and beg me to give her kids to her? No way. She'll make more children on a drunken binge and then abandon them just like that. Jessica Smith turned away from the window, hesitated for a moment, and then said, "But it may be for the best."
Clara looked at the superintendent in surprise. What good could it be? Now he would go to the orphanage, then to a boarding school, and then he would be alone in the whole world. No relatives, no loved ones. What about you and me? Jessica Smith asked, approaching Clara, who had finished feeding Sam and was changing him into a clean onesie. It's our responsibility not to let this little man be lost alone, not to be lost in the big world without support. Do you think someone will adopt him? Clara rocked Sam in her arms. The baby was peacefully sleeping. I don't think, but I know Jessica Smith said firmly. I have a very wealthy foreign couple in mind. They have been asking for a baby for a long time. They live in Italy. They are very wealthy people, but they are not old. But that is none of our business. This boy fully fits their description. Blonde-haired, blue-eyed. They promise to pay well. And you, when they come, do not dare to say that his mother is an alcoholic. These Europeans are very suspicious. They think that if the mother drank, then the child will not do well. Just as long as they do not find the child in another institution. Let's hope so. The morning was warm and sunny. Standing on the playground next to the sandbox, Megan greeted the children. Moms and dads came through the wicket, leading their children by the hand. Hello, Megan, they greeted the teacher, and she smiled and nodded. It was the first work week after vacation. For a whole month, the kindergarten where Megan worked was under repair, and the staff enjoyed their vacation. Now everyone was back together and life would begin again, full of children's laughter, worries, and activities with the little ones. The children missed their teacher too, and happily showed off the toys they had brought with them, though Megan didn't approve. She thought that there were enough dolls, cubes, and constructors in the group. Besides, there were often conflicts between the children because of their personal toys. My daddy bought me a new doll, Lara said, showing her teacher a new toy. Megan remembered what had happened to the old doll that Lara had brought to the kindergarten before her vacation. The girls had ripped its head off. Oh, how hard it had been for the teacher. Because of that doll, the girls fought in the locker room. Lara even scratched her cheek, and a drop of blood appeared on the girl's skin. The principal scolded Megan like a delinquent girl. You know who her father is. One word from him would be enough to get us all out of here and never be able to find work again. The superintendent reprimanded Megan. You can talk him down any way you want so he doesn't complain. But they're kids, and things happen to them. The teacher tried to justify herself. Different. But I don't even want to hear what Laura's father will say to you when you tell him that. Increasingly raising her tone, said the headmistress. I've already called him. Soon he will arrive in his foreign car, accompanied by security guards, and we will not show a little. While waiting for the girl's parent, Megan was worried, but when he entered the group, she tried not to show any sign. Daddy, Lara, to her father, look what they did to my doll. The man hugged his daughter, looked at her cheek. The scratch had been treated, and the girl had a band-aid on her cheek. I'll take my daughter home, the man said. She'll be with a nanny for a few days. Yes, of course, Megan nodded her head. She was ready to explain what had happened between the children, but the man gestured for her to stop, adding, Don't say anything. Just imagine, if it was not a simple scratch, but a more serious injury, where would you as a caretaker go now? Patrick, I always say that you should not bring toys from home. The boys have constant conflicts because of them. Shut up, the man shouted at her. Your job is to make sure that these conflicts do not arise. Leaving the locker room with his daughter, he turned around and looked carefully at the teacher. Today I only warned you. Please think carefully about what I said. Megan sighed and escorted the father and daughter out with a look. She was in no way afraid of this overbearing and strong man. She just put herself in his shoes and wondered what she would do if something like this happened to her child. She would probably be nervous too, maybe even swear and yell at the negligent teacher. But Megan had no children of her own. After leaving the orphanage, the girl went to teacher training school for kindergarten teacher. Megan has always loved children, constantly fiddled with the younger ones, taught them to draw, mold plasticine, braided pigtails girls in the boarding school. And the little ones reached out to her. All day long she played with younger children, which caused ridicule peers. Look, our Megan again in the mother-daughter game. They laughed. Megan, adopt them. All at once, joked the older kids. And she didn't take offense, reading books to the children, carefully covering them at night if their blankets slipped, and in the morning making sure they brushed their teeth and washed their faces. Sometimes she wondered if someone else cared for her little brother the same way. Megan never forgot about Sam. She was only 5 when they were separated, but she still remembered her mother, their apartment, Ciara's drunken friends, and even her neighbor, Aunt Kate. Megan also remembered that day in the park when she had sat next to the stroller for a long time, waiting for her mother. As she grew older, she wondered more and more why her mom hadn't come back then. Maybe something had happened to her. What if she had been taken to the hospital? What if she had been attacked by bandits? There had to be some reason why Mom hadn't come back to the park for them. But with each passing year, Megan realized more and more clearly that her mother had simply abandoned them. A year before graduation from the orphanage, when the girl was 15 years old, the superintendent showed her documents, which contained scant information about the girl's mother, as well as the address where Megan and her brother used to live. It turned out that the police officers managed to track down Kiara, but immediately after that she was deprived of parental rights to both children. The woman was found drunk as a skunk on the street. She was lying near a liquor store, holding an empty bottle of vodka. Passers-by were indignant. Where did you see a drunken woman sleeping in the middle of the day on a busy street? Someone called the police, and Ciara was taken to the station.
After hearing about it, Megan decided to find her mother. The girl wanted to know where her brother was. She found the address of the barracks, which she vaguely remembered from childhood memories, went up to the second floor and knocked on the door. No one opened it. Megan knocked a few more times and then went out into the yard and sat down on a bench.
"Jesus, Megan, are you there?" She heard a cheerful call. An older woman ran up to the girl. Megan recognized her as her neighbor, who often took her to her house as a child and treated her to delicious gingerbread. She remembered how Aunt Kate had scolded her mother for drinking and going out, leaving the children alone at home hungry and unsupervised. "I'm Aunt Kate. Don't you remember me?" the woman asked, looking into the girl's face. "I do," Megan smiled. "Oh, why are you sitting here? Come to my place, let's drink tea and talk." Aunt Kate took Megan's hand. "Where is Mom?" the girl asked, and felt how strange the word Mom sounded, as if she was asking not about her family, but about a complete stranger. Come, I'll tell you everything." Aunt Kate pulled her by the hand in the direction of the neighboring entrance, hugged her by the shoulders, and led her to her apartment. Nothing had changed in Aunt Kate's house. Even the furniture was in the same place and smelled the same as it did when she was a child. Megan hesitantly walked into the room and sat down on the couch. The neighbor fussed. She wanted to treat Megan to something delicious. "I'll put the kettle on," she said. In a flash, the table was filled with candy, cookies, and gingerbread, the little goodies Aunt Kate kept on hand in case she had visitors. Over tea, she began to ask the girl questions. "How are you doing, Megan? No trouble?" "I'm fine, Aunt Kate, I'm fine. I'll be out of the orphanage soon. I'm going to teacher training school." "You like kids, huh? No wonder. Sam was in your arms all the time, even though you were just a baby yourself. Do you know where my brother is?" Megan asked with concern in her eyes. The neighbor sighed, rubbing the corner of the tablecloth. "I came to see you, Megan, at the orphanage. A long time ago, really, a couple weeks after you and Sam were taken away. They wouldn't let me in, said I wasn't related." "Thank you for your concern." Megan waited impatiently for Aunt Kate to say something about her brother. "And I tried to find Sam," the woman continued after a short pause. "He was just a baby, so they put him in an orphanage. I went there too, all the way to the head of the house, and she told me that Sam was adopted." "How am I supposed to find him?" Megan was worried. She wondered if there was any way to find him. "You can't," Aunt Kate cut off her faint hope. "If a child is adopted, all information about his new parents and where he lives is classified. Just like that, you know. I wish I could find him. He doesn't remember me at all, does he?" the girl asked. For sure, the woman nodded her head. How could a 6-month-old child remember anything? And his parents hardly know that his adopted son has a sister. And if they do, they won't tell. Why would they? "So I'll never see Sam again?" Megan was upset. "Life is long and unpredictable," the neighbor said thoughtfully. "No one can know how it will turn out and what surprises it will bring." They were silent, drinking tea and thinking about the complexity of human destinies. Finally, Aunt Kate broke the silence.
"Your mum's dead, Megan," she said sadly. "It's been a week since she was buried."
The girl looked up at her neighbor. She didn't remember her mother well, but her heart still stabbed, pinched, squeezed so tightly that it was hard to breathe. "She drank a lot," Aunt Kate continued, trying to choose her words so as not to hurt Megan's soul. Drunken friends had set fires in their apartment a few times, and the whole house was on fire. They went to the council, demanded that Grace be evicted. But no way. Megan listened to her, staring thoughtfully out the window. Maybe it was for the best that her mother had left her and Sam in the park. Megan herself was well fed and clothed, doing well in school. And Sam has parents now. I wonder if they take good care of him, if they love him like family, she thought. Oh yes, the neighbors suddenly became alarmed. I found the photo cards when I cleaned your apartment after your mother's death. I'll bring them to you. I kept them for myself, thinking I'd give them to you or Sam someday. Aunt Kate left the kitchen and returned a minute later, holding the black and white photos. She placed them on the table in front of the girl and sat down across from her again. Megan took the pictures carefully, gently, as if they were something very precious, very expensive. There they were, Dad, Mom, and her, and in another picture, Dad and Mom alone. Mom in a wedding dress and veil, and Dad in a suit and tie. Young and very handsome, the parents were smiling, looking very happy. And in this photo, Megan and Dad are next to the stroller Sam was sleeping in. You know what Megan, Aunt Kate said in a serious, firm voice? Go to the council, claim you're the late Ciara's daughter so you can keep the apartment. If you get out of the orphanage, where will you live? I've saved all my papers. I've got them. Our barracks is being demolished. Maybe you'll get a comfortable apartment. Thank you, Aunt Kate. Megan thanked her neighbor. I'll be sure to go. The woman went into the room and brought a cardboard folder, handed it to the girl. Here's everything. It's got documents and everything I thought you might remember. I don't know why, but I also put a fireman's badge, which was left by your father, and his certificates for excellent service. Can I have more pictures? Megan asked. Oh, come on, baby, of course you can. I saved them for you. The neighbor reached for a nail on the wall. And here are the keys to your apartment. They're spare keys. I've always kept them with me. Thank you, Megan thanked the woman again. They hugged tightly, and the girl left the apartment. Looking out the window as she walked slowly across the yard, Aunt Kate crossed her figure. God take care of you, girl. The first day of work after vacation went well. Apparently, having missed each other, the children played merrily, not even fighting. Megan also had time to have a good rest and began her duties with enthusiasm. She has a preparatory group. We need to do more to prepare the children for school. After breakfast, she repeated with the children the alphabet and numbers up to 10, and then took the children for a walk outside. While the children played, Megan and 2 other teachers from other groups talked on the sidelines. Jake. Drop that rock right now, Megan's colleague Vanessa shouted when she saw that the wiry boy had picked up a shank from the ground and was about to throw it at one of the kids. I'll put you next to me now and you'll stand punished for the whole walk. The boy put the stone on the ground and ran away. I'll turn gray with them. These are not children, but a punishment of some kind. Vanessa theatrically raised her hands to the sky. Oh, why the vacation ends so quickly? And do not say, supported her Angelina. My friend and I went to the south for 2 weeks. Girls, I'll tell you, the best place to have a great, there is no romance. The men at the resorts were swarming around us like bees. I still do not understand. Angelina, how do you manage on the salary of a kindergarten teacher in the resorts to roll? Vanessa asked. If it were not for my husband, I would be alone on these pennies long ago, starved to death. You just don't understand anything. Angelina raised her finger up moralizingly. At the resort is not money is the most important thing. Yes? I wonder what is. No, of course, you need to buy a plane ticket, book accommodation, but you can do it all in advance, so you don't have to spend your vacation money later. Angelina sighed and folded her arms on her chest. At the resort, girls, the main thing is the bow. What Vanessa didn't understand, staring at her friend and colleague. What onions? Onions. Oh, you're dark, Vanessa. Sitting with your husband in a paneled 2-bedroom, nowhere to go work, home, work, and people have long since learned to live in a new way. What's onions got to do with it? The teacher persisted. Onion means image. What image you create for yourself, so you will spend your vacation at sea. That's what you should spend your money on. Nice clothes, makeup, manicures, and rejuvenation treatments. You, by the way, both of you should go to a beautician. Without hearing Angelina, Megan and Vanessa laughed. Angelina had a very smart look when she gave advice, and she herself was still not married by her 40s. And that, without embarrassment, continued to share with her friends the secrets of winning cavaliers. "I'm here before going to the resort," went to a familiar beautician, Angelina said, as if inadvertently showing a new fashionable manicure. "So she advised me a beauty injection. It's just magic. Wrinkles are instantly smoothed out, as if there was never a hint of them." "And where did your beautician injected you?" Laughing, asked Vanessa. "There," Angelina pointed her manicured finger on her forehead between her eyebrows. "My friend noticed that on the forehead wrinkles appear. They really spoil the expression of the face, not to mention the fact that they give away age. And now her forehead is as smooth as a young girl's. You should have it done too." Vanessa took a small mirror out of her pocket and looked into it. There was a small crease on her forehead. The woman wrinkled her nose, then ran her hand over the wrinkle. "What did I tell you?" Angelina looked triumphant. "Soon your man will tell you that you've grown old and look like Baba Yaga." "Oh, come on." Vanessa waved away, but stopped laughing, thinking. "And you, Megan, too. It would not hurt to pierce the interbrow, because your expression always seems frowning and dissatisfied." "Oh, thank you, Angelina. I'd better refrain from it, so I don't have to walk around with facial nerve palsy," Megan said politely but knowingly. "You girls don't look after your appearance," Angelina shook her head. "Women after 40, there is nothing left but to resort to the help of specialists, because nature at this age turns to us backwards, and to the young backwards." "Don't be crazy." Angelina Vanessa was still trying to argue with her. "There is nothing more beautiful than natural beauty. Listen to you, Megan and I should have our asses tightened and our boobs made of silicone. I don't think that's going to help you." Angelina waved her hand. "After work, you rush to your husband like a horse at the races, and from Megan in general, men flee like the plague." "What's wrong with loving my husband?" Vanessa stood up, but Megan stopped the argument. A glance at her watch told her it was time to go to group. It was getting close to lunchtime. After work, Megan stopped by the supermarket. On the way back from daycare, she suddenly remembered Angelina's words for some reason. She was right about something. Megan would soon be 45, and it seemed like a lifetime, but no family, no children. She gives all her warmth to her students, and those who graduated from kindergarten probably forget about her. However, Megan had a chance to marry. While studying in pedagogical college, she met a student of medical school, future surgeon Brandon. The guy was nice, well-mannered, intelligent. Everyone said that he was waiting for a brilliant future. After graduating from the university, he was assigned to the Far East. That day, he and Megan celebrated Brandon's diploma in a small summer cafe. The guy took her hand, looked carefully into her eyes, and asked, "Will you be my wife?" Megan was confused. She liked Brandon very much. The girl was very afraid that his parents, who were also doctors, would treat her badly because she was brought up in an orphanage. But they perfectly accepted Megan. Never a word or a look did not express dissatisfaction with the choice of their son. She and Brandon had noble and necessary professions. She brought up children, and he saved people from terrible diseases. When Brandon proposed to Megan, she did not know that he had already been assigned to faraway Boston. After saying, "I'll think about it," she was almost certain she'd say yes. There was no reason for Megan to turn Brandon down. But when she heard that they were going to move to Boston, she flatly refused to even hear about marriage. Not understanding why Megan was acting this way, the young man tried to ask her what was wrong with the move. Then Megan confessed she's waiting for her brother, who was lost as a child, to grow up and return to her hometown someday. That way there's a chance they'll find each other again. And if she leaves, she'll never see Sam again. "You just don't love me," Brandon exclaimed angrily. The reason his girlfriend had given him seemed to him to be a small enough reason to destroy the union of two loving hearts. Megan did not begin to change the guy's mind to prove that she loved him. Saying sorry, she just left. Brandon tried to call her several times, but then he left and she heard nothing more about the failed fiancé. Walking out of the supermarket with full bags of groceries, she hesitated and tripped over the curb. The bags fell out of her hands. Potatoes, onions, tomatoes, sausage, and tomatoes flew across the sidewalk. All the contents of her bags ended up on the pavement. Squatting down, the woman rushed to pick up the groceries when suddenly she saw feet in polished shoes and black pants in front of her. Megan slowly lifted her head, looking up. Standing in front of her was Patrick, Lara's dad, who had had a doll broken by the girls in the group a month ago. The man sat down as well and began to gather potato tubers into a bag. "Hello, Megan," he said. "What are you doing, Patrick? Don't be. Helping you pick up fallen groceries. Is something wrong?" The man straightened up, holding a bag with a broken handle. "Thank you," Megan thanked him, "but I could have done it myself." "I'm sure you could," Patrick said with a smile, and she was quite timid in front of this solid, handsome man. "Are you going home?" "Yes," Megan answered quickly, then wondered why she was telling him where she was going. The woman held out her hands to take the package from Patrick, but he prevented her from doing so. "Then let me give you a ride home," the man offered politely. "Your bags are torn. It's uncomfortable to carry them. And what if you drop them again, and I'm not around?" The man's face was completely serious, even imperturbable, but his eyes sparkled with fun. Megan was completely confused, frozen in indecision, looking at the bags in Patrick's hands, then at him. Seeing that her daughter's teacher was hesitant to agree to his proposal, Patrick added, "I feel bad about that conversation. To be blunt, I feel guilty that I spoke to you so rudely when Lara's cheek was scratched. So consider my offer as a sincere apology. Let's go." He took Megan by the elbow and led her to a beautiful black car. The driver jumped out and opened the door. The woman sat down in the back seat. Through the window pane, she saw the driver take the bags from Patrick's hands and put them in the trunk.
The car moved off. Megan felt uncomfortable about taking advantage of her kindergartner's father's offer, and he seemed to see the whole thing as a fun adventure.
"How did Lara behave in kindergarten today?" he asked. "That's a strange question," Megan smiled. "Your daughter's behavior is impeccable." "I guess you just don't want to upset me," the man tilted his head slightly and looked at the teacher. "Her nanny is just a barrage of complaints about me when I come home. Lara doesn't eat her porridge well. Lara refused to sleep during the day. Lara stepped in a puddle and soaked her shoes." Patrick laughed merrily. "The porridge, the afternoon nap, and the wet shoes are minor things," Megan smiled. "Much more important, how Lara perceived her surroundings and people." "Really?" the man asked. "How does she perceive it all?" With curiosity, Megan answered confidently. "In this case, she's just studying the nanny's reaction. So she's getting an experience that fits into a simple pattern. If I do this, then this will happen. And I thought she was just messing with the nanny and testing her patience." The car pulled up in front of Megan's driveway. The driver obligingly opened the door and gave her a handshake, then pulled bags from the trunk of the car. "It was a pleasure giving you a ride," Patrick said, and shook Megan's hand. "Igor will help you carry the groceries to the apartment." Realizing that it was useless to refuse help, the woman didn't resist. "Goodbye," she said, and walked toward the elevator, feeling Lara's father's gaze on her back. Stepping out of the elevator, she opened the apartment door with her key and let the driver in. He strode resolutely into the kitchen, put the bags on the table, and, saying "have a good day," and left. Closing the door behind the guy, Megan kicked off her shoes and hung her coat on her shoulders. She looked at herself in the large mirror above the dresser in the hallway. "The wrinkle on my forehead is really noticeable," the woman thought, and ran her finger along the skin between her eyebrows where a shallow crease was visible. Angelina was right. Megan wasn't doing well with men. Everything in her life seemed fine. Aunt Kate, a neighbor in the barracks, had advised her to go to the city council to apply for privatization. A few years later, the barracks was demolished, and all the residents were given apartments in a new 9-story building in a bedroom community. True, by that time Aunt Kate was already gone. Megan, who then lived in a dormitory pedagogical school, was very happy to have her own apartment. As soon as the occupancy of the apartment building began, she moved in and began to organize the apartment. Megan herself glued wallpaper, chose furniture, bought dishes. She hardly knew how to cook, as the orphanage did not teach her how to cook. So in the evening she learned recipes for different dishes, finding them on the internet. Sometimes her friends from the pedagogical school came to her, and they organized parties. Often the girls came with their boyfriends and brought friends to introduce Megan to them, but nothing much ever worked out for her with the opposite sex. After getting a job in a kindergarten, the girl generally immersed herself in the process of raising other people's children and forgot about her personal life. After Brandon's proposal to marry him, she realized that the man who would be next to her would always demand attention only to him, and Megan dreamed of finding a brother, the nearest and dearest person on earth. Her Sam, Quiet time in kindergarten was a time when the kindergartners could not only eat lunch, but also chat. So this time, Vanessa, Megan, and Angelina sat down at the table and shared news.
Yesterday I found a website with so many great cosmetics, Angelina said, munching on a cutlet. I bought so many things, masks, balms, and rejuvenating creams.
Good for you, said Vanessa. Only you, when you meet men, leave your passport at work. Why is that? Angelina did not understand, and that they did not find it in the year of your birth did not see. Then you know masks and injections will not help. Your young suitors will run away, shining their heels. Vanessa laughed merrily, and Megan, looking at the stretched face of Angelina, smiled. Vanessa and Angelina were always teasing each other, and it was fun to watch them bicker. By the way, you don't care what you look like, and I'm going to keep up the good work, said Angelina, fixing her hair. Our brand has been on the market for 100 years. That's a great slogan for you, Vanessa continued to tease her friend. Or it could be despite 100 years of experience, I'm still functioning.
Come on, Angelina waved her hand, pouting. The woman wanted to change the subject, so she turned to Megan.
It's your birthday coming up, isn't it? Isn't it? You're not wrong, Angelina, Vanessa said without letting Megan answer. And not just a birthday, but an anniversary. 45, the woman is a berry again. How are we going to celebrate, Megan? I don't think I'm going to celebrate, Megan tried to dismiss her friends. Yeah, that's how we let your birthday get washed out. No, we'll celebrate it properly, Angelina wagged her finger at Megan. Why don't we go to a restaurant? My husband and I have not been anywhere for so long. You forgot to add, we haven't been anywhere, but the couch, Angelina interrupted Vanessa. No restaurants. It is no longer relevant, and in general, there is boring, and there are no decent free men. And our Marinachka Vladimirovna should urgently look for a beau. Megan laughed. Too serious were the plans for her anniversary among her friends, and she had not even thought about how she would celebrate the anniversary. Girls, but I do not want to cook anything. Fuss. Think about how to have fun. I'll buy a cake, a bottle of wine. We'll sit around when the kids are in group. No way, Angelina squealed. You don't want to organize anything, don't. Vanessa and I will organize everything ourselves, right? Vanessa had no plans to organize the party. She wanted to come to the restaurant, ready to have a good evening. But Angelina's look was so convincing that she had to nod her head. That's right. Do whatever you want, Megan agreed. She never celebrated her birthday, never invited anyone. Last year, she'd bought herself a bottle of wine and brought a box of chocolates from work, donated by her co-workers. She sat at the table in the kitchen, set the pictures she'd once taken from Aunt Kate in front of her, poured the wine into a glass, drank, and sank into the thoughts that troubled her. For a long time, Megan had searched for her brother Sam on social media, but then she realized it was a pointless endeavor. If he was adopted, they could have changed his first and last name, and even his date of birth. Sam might not even know he had an older sister. And she, seeing him, wouldn't even recognize him. It had been so long since she'd seen her brother. Plus, he was just an infant, and children change as they get older. Then Megan decided to apply to a famous TV program to look for her brother. But there was no news from there for several years. On her birthday, she drank wine alone and thought that maybe Sam was just around the corner, maybe even in her town or some of the neighboring towns, and she couldn't find him. Megan was brought out of her brooding state by Angelina. She shook her by the shoulder. Ali, wake up, enchanted. Excuse me, girls, I've been thinking. We're asking you what to get you for your anniversary. I suggest beauty products or a certificate to a beautician, and Vanessa says money. I don't even know, Megan replied uncertainly. That's what I'm saying. Why do you need money? Where are you going to spend it? Your paycheck alone is enough. There's always something to spend money on, Vanessa argued. Oh, don't be ridiculous. Angelina waved a hand at her. If you knew where you could spend it, you wouldn't be wearing the same boots for the 3rd year. Well, you've got a nerve, Vanessa took offense. Girls, stop fighting and arguing over nothing. I don't need anything, Megan tried to reconcile her friends. I don't need anything. But the active and active Angelina could not be stopped. All right, let's do neither you nor me, she said to Vanessa. Let's give Megan a gift she'll remember for the rest of her life. I have an idea. As they talked, The quiet time flew by. It was time to get the kids out of bed and serve the afternoon snack. The women went off to their groups. Megan spent the rest of the day working with the children in the group and then took them outside. It was a nice day, and the children scattered around the grounds playing catch-up and ball. Gradually, their parents came and picked them up one by one, taking them home. When all the children had been taken away, Megan was picking up the toys left behind by the children. Suddenly, she saw Patrick, Lara's father, walking down the path. "Hello, Megan," the man greeted her. "Good evening, Patrick and Lara has already been picked up by the nanny," said Megan, surprised that the girl's father came to the kindergarten, and even so late, when all the children were already taken away by their parents. "I know." The man stopped next to her. "I just really wanted to walk you home." "You don't have to, and it's embarrassing," Megan said. She was confused, not understanding why her father had suddenly decided to take her home. The woman looked at the road. There, behind the fence, was Patrick's car, and the driver was standing nearby, waiting for the chief. "Do not refuse. I am very pleased. And secondly, I would like to talk to you about your daughter," said the man. "It's very important to me." "Well, all right," Megan agreed. "I'll just go up to the group, get my purse, and lock the door. I'll wait for you by the car." Patrick turned and walked down the path toward the gate. When Megan approached him, he opened the car door for her. "Please have a seat." He helped Megan sit down and sat down himself. On the way out, the man asked the kindergarten teacher, "How was your day, Megan?" "Good, nothing extraordinary happened. The children are healthy, active, no one quarreled, and that's great," she replied with a smile. "What did my Lara do?" Patrick asked. "You have a wonderful, very well-mannered and smart girl," praised Megan. "That's true. I haven't had any problems with her in previous years." "I think you're giving her too much credit." "It's not my policy at all," Megan replied. "I always try to tell parents the truth about their children, although many people don't always like to get a teacher's opinion about their child." "I'm curious," the teacher's interlocutor responded enthusiastically. "Your daughter is a non-conflict, inquisitive child, but in my opinion she lacks female affection, communication." "Megan, I'm sorry to interrupt you," the man looked her in the eyes. "Let's go for a walk. It's only a couple of blocks from your house, and the weather today is so conducive to walking." Megan was surprised at the suggestion, but agreed to walk. They got out of the car and walked slowly down the sidewalk. "Let me start by saying that Lara is not my daughter," Patrick told Megan. "Then whose is it?" "My own little sister. When Lara was only a couple months old, her sister disappeared, and then she was found murdered." "That's awful," Megan said with a shrug. "Yes, it was a tragedy," Patrick replied. But Megan opened her mouth, but the man beat her to it. "Do you mean to ask why she calls me Dad?" he asked. "Actually, yes. At my sister's grave, I gave my word that I would raise Lara as my own daughter. I've never been married. I've never had children of my own. At least I don't know anything about them. I just took care of the girl, and one day she said her first word, and it was Daddy. That's when I decided, let her think I was her father." "That's an amazing story," Megan said quietly. "Looking at Lara, you'd never think she was worried or lacking affection, warmth, love. You make a wonderful father." "You think so?" They'd already reached Megan's driveway and the man stopped. He looked at her with his velvet brown eyes, and she felt as if he and Patrick had been friends for a long time. Their conversation during the short walk had been very confidential. "Megan," the man said, "I enjoyed talking to you so much. You're a wonderful, understanding, attentive person and a very beautiful woman." Megan was a little embarrassed, lowered her eyes, but felt that the words of Lara's father were pleasant to her. "I would very much like to invite you to the restaurant this Sunday. Would you mind?" Patrick looked hopefully at Megan. "We could have a nice meal, relax and socialize. Or suggest your own program where you'd like to go." "I'll make it happen." "You know, Patrick," Megan smiled, "you don't have to go to a restaurant to socialize and eat good food." "Really? Where do you want to go?" "I'm inviting you to my house. It's my birthday on Sunday." "That's wonderful. I'm happy to accept your invitation." "Thank you." The man took her hand and touched her lips. Megan smiled, tilting her head slightly. and when he let go of her palm, she said, "See you later then? Goodbye, we'll definitely be at your place on Sunday." Megan headed for her driveway, and Patrick watched her for a few more minutes. He really liked this calm, a little sad, intelligent, and beautiful woman. I should instruct my secretary to pick out the best bouquet of flowers and suggest gift options, he thought as he got into the car. The week was drawing to a close. In the evening, Vanessa and Angelina went shopping. They couldn't decide what to get their friend for her anniversary. "It has to be special," Angelina said, "so that she would remember it for the rest of her life." "Why bother?" Vanessa argued. "The main thing is to make Megan feel good." "Ugh, I don't like cliches," Angelina exclaimed, stopping. "A person should get something he doesn't have. And you, then a set, then bedding, then a vase. Do you think she needs it?" "No, of course not, but they're all necessities." "What do you think she needs?" "She needs a good man. That's what she needs," Angelina answered firmly. "Without men, life is a bore." Vanessa looked at her friend in surprise. No, of course she had seen in various TV shows how men are packed in a big box, and then they jump out of it, like a devil from a snuff box in small panties and with a bare torso. But to give a gift like that to Megan, it never occurred to her. "You want to pay for a stripper?" "A call boy?" Vanessa asked uncertainly. "Call it what you want, but I've decided Megan needs a jolt. We'll get her a man for tonight and let her figure out what to do with him." "Where are we going to get him?" "Let's go." Angelina pulled her friend by the hand to a bench across the street from the hypermarket. Sitting down on the bench, she took out her cell phone from her purse. After searching something in it, she dialed a number. "Hello, we need a boy, that is, a man for entertainment on the anniversary." "How much? Are you crazy or what? Are your men made of gold?" Having switched off, Angelina indignantly said, "You're completely crazy. A man for the evening for the price of an eagle horse, damn." "What? Did the idea fail?" Vanessa gloated. "Let's go, there is a great department of good, quality linens." The woman nodded toward the hypermarket. But Angelina was not the kind of person to give up at the first difficulties. Pensive, she remained silent, looking in front of her. Suddenly her gaze fell on a beggar who sat right on the ground next to the shopping center. "I have an idea," she exclaimed. "We'll find a man for Megan Vladimirovna right on the street." "I'm stupid. They're literally lying around and we don't even notice." "What do you mean?" Vanessa didn't know what her friend was talking about. "You see that beggar over there? Well, that's who we're bringing to the anniversary. Why, we'll pay him, and he'll go like a calf on a string. They'll do anything for any penny." "Are you crazy?" "I think it's a bad idea," Vanessa said uncertainly. "It's a good idea." Angelina got up from the bench, and with a decisive step went to the homeless man. Stopping in front of the homeless man, in front of whom lay an old, dusty hat with change, she opened her purse and gave the homeless man 100 rubles. He nodded gratefully. "Thank you." "Do you sit here every day?" she asked, pretending that she wanted to take out another bill from a pink leather purse with rhinestones. "I sit here from morning till evening," answered the homeless man. "Do you want a lot of money?" "You want to sell my organs?" The homeless man was frightened. He got ready, grabbed his hat, and scattered the money in the pockets of his dirty raincoat. He was about to run away from this well-dressed strange woman, but she stopped him. "Wait, what the hell do I need your organs for? What, should I pickle them or something?" Trying not to scare the homeless man, Angelina said, "I suggest you go to visit a lady. She has a holiday, a birthday, you know." The homeless man looked at Angelina with empty, frightened eyes, not understanding what this beautiful woman with bright makeup on her face wanted from him.
You will congratulate her and spend the evening with her. You'll eat delicious food and drink wine, and I'll give you this much. Angelina took out 2 red $5,000 bills from her purse. 10,000 rubles for one evening. How do you like the offer?
"And you won't cheat?" The homeless man was still looking at Angelina with apprehension. "Yes, painfully, I need to offend you." "You already out, life offended. On the contrary, you will help me, and I will help you." The homeless man nodded his head. "That's good, that's the deal," Angelina rejoiced. "In short, tomorrow sit here. We'll come to you with that woman over there, and then you'll get your money. You won't let me down." Shaking his head, the man sat down again on the paving stones and spread his hat in front of him. Angelina stood next to him for a while, thought, and then, shoving another 50 rubles into the homeless man's hat, walked toward Vanessa sitting on the bench. "The thing is in the hat," she said triumphantly. "I'm good, and that's what I had to prove." Vanessa thought her colleague's idea was crazy, reckless, and ridiculous, but Angelina couldn't be persuaded. Adventurism is always fountained in her, making her go for the most reckless and crazy deeds. However, Angelina always got out of the most difficult situations. Vanessa still remembered the story, at which all the teachers in kindergarten laughed for a long time. Whether out of boredom for fun or for some other reason, she invited 5 men to her house for a date, locked the door, and threw the key out the window. When she then told how they, until the morning, whoever they wanted, tried to win her attention, everyone died with laughter. However, when the men, quite drunk, began to fight and the situation took a dangerous turn, Angelina had to call the emergency services to break down the door and let the raging men out. On Sunday, Megan decided to sleep longer, but forgot to turn off the alarm clock on her smartphone, and it persistently notified that it was 7:30. The woman turned off the alarm clock, but she couldn't go back to sleep. She took a shower, brewed coffee, and began to think about what to prepare for the holiday table to treat her friends. Megan was also worried about what Vanessa and Angelina would think of her when they saw Patrick. She hadn't told them she'd invited Lara's dad from her group to visit. Flipping through pages of websites on the internet, she wrote out a few salads, some other simple appetizers on a piece of paper, and decided to roast some French-style meat in the oven. The woman opened the refrigerator. Yesterday she had gone shopping and bought a couple of bottles of wine. A beautiful cake was also on the shelf next to the fruit. All that was left was to prepare everything. She laid out the ingredients needed for the holiday dishes on the table, put on an apron, and started cooking. Angelina and Vanessa met in the square near the hypermarket. Angelina, as always, was in a high, excited mood. She was anticipating how Megan would be impressed by their surprise. Vanessa, on the other hand, still thought Ricky's idea was stupid. "I understand, to introduce her to a good man, decent, with a normal job, but you're dragging a bum to her."
Oh, believe me, tortured men make the best husbands. At least they're grateful, like dogs picked up off the street.
"I'm amazed at you, Angelina. You have an answer for everything, and it's hard to argue with you." "Don't argue with me, just do as I say." "Let's go, there he is." He is sitting there, little dove, waiting like a sweetheart. Angelina giggled and went towards the homeless man, who was sitting in the same place as yesterday. The man, seeing Angelina, got excited, jumped up from the paving stone, stretched out in a string. "Hello, sufferer," cheerfully greeted the homeless man. "What's your name?" "Alex," said the man. He scratched his thickly stubbled chin and bent down to pick up his hat. Take the money. Throw this junk in the trash. There's no need to carry unnecessary dirt from the street."
The homeless man obeyed and then followed the women. Angelina brought her friend and the strange beggar to her house. "Take off your shoes on the landing, because my floors are washed," she told him, "and throw off your clothes right away."
Angelina gave the homeless man a large bag to put his things in, and then led him into the hallway, looking him over from head to toe. For a minute it occurred to her that the clothes on the man were expensive, high quality, but they were very dirty and even torn in some places. The sweater had once been snow white, and the jeans had an almost obliterated but recognizable label of a famous brand on the back.
"How long have you been homeless?" she asked.
"About a month," the man answered. "I'm not from around here, I came to." "Spare me the details of your nomadic life," Angelina interrupted the homeless man. "Anyway, here's the bathroom. There's a towel, a razor, soap, shampoo, everything. Anything you might need. Go wash up and get cleaned up. Got it, Alex? Shit, is that a name or a nickname?" The man said nothing, walked through the bathroom door and locked himself inside. "Why did you lock yourself in?" Angelina shouted, laughing. "You think we're going to watch you? Yeah, we haven't seen your stuff, have we?" Vanessa poked her friend in the side. "Why are you doing this to him? He may be homeless, but he's a human being."
Angelina ignored her words and went into the room. She opened the closet and thought about what to wear as a gift for Megan.
"Well, Vanessa, shall we wrap our present in a pretty wrapper?" Angelina was having a lot of fun. Everything that was happening was an exciting adventure for her. The woman stood on a stool and pulled a large box from the mezzanine. "These are my late daddy's things," she said, nodding at the neatly folded shirts, pants, and jacket. The box even held my father's underwear. "I don't know why I haven't thrown it all away. I can't bring myself to do it." From the bathroom, I heard the voice of Alex, the homeless guy. "Women, there is a robe hanging here. Can I put it on?" "Go ahead," shouted Angelina. A few seconds later, the homeless man appeared in the hallway, wearing a satin pink robe that barely covered his buttocks and did not fit over his chest. Angelina laughed, unable to contain her emotion. Vanessa smiled, saying glamorous. Alex was embarrassed. He crumpled in the doorway of the large living room, scrutinizing himself in the mirror. The women noted that after the laundering, the man looked quite decent. He looked no more than 40 years old, though at first Vanessa thought he looked about 50. Smoothly shaved with combed blonde hair, the man smelled of shampoo.
"Okay, come here," Angelina called to him in a commanding tone.
The woman started pulling clothes out of the box. Socks, underwear, pants, shirt, tie fell on the couch. "Let's try them on," she said, pulling out her father's family underwear in front of the homeless man. The man hesitated, clearly embarrassed. "Could you turn away while I'm getting dressed?" he asked, looking at his employers with an embarrassed look. "Look, Laris, the Baron are shy," Angelina laughed again, and then added, "Okay, relax, we are in the kitchen, if anything." The women left the room, leaving Alex alone with a mountain of clothes left by Angelina's late father. When the man entered the kitchen, they stared in amazement. The homeless man looked decent enough, his suit fit neatly, and his blue shirt matched the color of his eyes. "Wow," Vanessa said in surprise. "And what did I tell you?" Angelina said triumphantly, pleased with herself. "Washed, combed, dressed up. What is not a handsome man? Would you like some tea?" The homeless man did not refuse. He sat down at the table, and Angelina put in front of him a cup with fragrant tea and a couple of sandwiches on a plate. The man happily munched on a bun and sausage, drinking his tea. Finally, Angelina put the cup in the sink and said,
"Stop eating, we're going to visit. There, and fatten up."
She looked at her watch and started to get ready. "We still have to pick up the flowers, let's hurry up," she said to Vanessa and Alex. Angelina was anticipating the emotions of the upcoming evening. She drew all kinds of pictures in her imagination. But most of all, she couldn't wait to see Megan's face when she found out that they had brought her a real street beggar as a gift. Vanessa thought the idea was silly, but being excited by Angelina's excitement, she decided to see what would happen. Standing on the doorstep of Megan's apartment, they shoved a bouquet of roses into the homeless man's hands. Vanessa pressed the bell button. A beautiful trill sounded, followed by footsteps. Hi, the friends shouted together when they saw a dressed-up colleague in a white collar dress with styled hair. Here we are, and not empty-handed. The guests walked into the hallway. Angelina poked Alex painfully in the side, who, confused, hesitated from foot to foot. He flinched and held out the bouquet to the birthday girl. "Happy birthday," said the man. "Thank you," Megan said, accepting the flowers and looking at her friends with a questioning look. "And this is Alex, meet Alex." Angelina chirped as if nothing had happened, kicking off her shoes and heading into the living room.
"This is our surprise for you," Vanessa said. "So to speak, a beau for the party."
"Come in," Megan invited politely. In the center of the room stood a table covered with a tablecloth, on which plates, cutlery, and several salad bowls with appetizers were arranged. The pleasant smell of meat wafted throughout the apartment. The guests sat down at the table, and Megan put the flowers in a vase and joined them. "Alex, could you pour the wine?" she asked, handing the man a corkscrew.
He took the bottle, stared at the label, and said,
"For a holiday for such beautiful women, you need a different wine. Hey, and how did it not suit you?" Angelina giggled. "Sommelier from the heating system, damn. This wine is semi-sweet, and I feel that it smells like meat," Alex said with a serious look. "You should serve red semi-dry with meat." "Come on, pour it," he was making sense. Angelina pushed Alex with her elbow so that he would talk less. After drinking and snacking and sitting at the table for a while, the buddies said they had to go. It was part of Angelina's plan. Megan would spend the evening alone with Alex, and tomorrow at work they would announce to her that he was a regular bum. Then they'd laugh together at her friend's reaction. She might take offense, but it was a joke, after all. Angelina was sure that no one had ever received such an original gift. "Alex, will you help us get dressed?" she asked the man. He left the table and handed Angelina his coat, and she slipped 2 $5,000 bills into his pants pocket, as promised. "Behave yourself, street child." With those words to the bum, she walked out of Megan's apartment, dragging Vanessa with her. The door slammed shut and Alex stood still. "Well, what are you doing?" "Come on in, since my friends ran away so quickly, we'll celebrate together," Megan suggested. She was a little disappointed that Patrick hadn't shown up. She wanted to see the man again, but she figured he had better things to do.
Alex poured wine into glasses again, and Megan brought French meat from the kitchen.
"What's this?" the man asked. "French meat. Why the name?" "I don't know," the birthday girl shrugged. Alex gladly took a knife and fork in his hands, deftly cut a piece, and sent it to his mouth. Very tasty, but I would add Provençal herbs to it," he said. "Why?" Megan wondered. If it's French meat, there should be Provençal herbs and basil, but it was still very good. Megan scrutinized the man she was seeing for the first time. He had a strange accent and way of speaking. "Alex, aren't you from around here?" she finally asked. "A little out of town," the man answered. "What do you mean, a little?" Megan didn't understand. "I was born here, but I lived somewhere else."
"I see. You eat, eat. Don't be shy."
"I admit, I can't stop eating." Alex praised the woman's culinary skills. "Can I have more of this salad?" Sure, Megan moved the bowl closer to the man and thought that he ate a lot, as if he hadn't eaten for days, and praised the simplest salads as if he ate them for the first time. Suddenly, Alex grabbed his stomach and started to roll onto his side. "Oh, I don't feel well," he groaned. "What's wrong?" Megan jumped up to him, supporting him by the elbow, and helped him to move to the couch. "I can't breathe. I think I ate too much." Alex rolled his eyes and started rolling around on the couch. "Be patient. I'll call an ambulance." Megan ran for the phone, dialed 03, and called her address. Soon the EMTs arrived. Entering the room, they laid out an orange suitcase with medical supplies and examined the patient. "Let's unbutton the shirt," the doctor said.
Megan helped Alex undo the buttons, freed his chest from the blue fabric, and suddenly froze in place. At that moment, it seemed to her that the floor was moving out from under her feet, swaying up and down. The woman swayed, took a few steps back, and fell into a chair. Her eyes blurred and she lost consciousness.
Megan woke up to the pungent odor of ammonia. It hit her nose so hard that the woman shook her head, trying to find a stream of fresh air. "Woman, there's nothing wrong with the patient," said the paramedic, looking into the eyes of Megan, who had regained consciousness. "Why are you so worried? We gave him a pill, put him on a painkiller. He'll feel better soon. It's just that the man ate too much. And before that, he probably abstained from fatty and caloric food for a long time." Megan looked at the doctors and then at Alex, who was lying on her couch. The shirt on his chest was buttoned up. The woman escorted the doctors out and slowly, as if a ghost was in front of her, approached her guest. The man's eyes were closed. She leaned over him and carefully, so as not to disturb him, began to undo the top buttons of his shirt. Alex jerked, grabbed her arm. "What do you want? Why are you undressing me?" He shrieked fearfully. "Don't be afraid, please." Megan tried to calm him down. "Show me what's on your neck." Not understanding anything, Alex put his hand under his collar and pulled out a wooden pendant in the form of a horseshoe on an old cord. Tears appeared in Megan's eyes and slowly dripped onto the man's shirt. "Sam, is that you?" the woman whispered. She looked at her brother lying in front of her with all her eyes. She wanted to hug and hold him to her. But at that moment, the doorbell rang. Megan shuddered, stood up and went to open it. A smiling Patrick stood on the doorstep. He was holding a bouquet and a small box decorated with a bow. "Hello, Megan. Here I am, as I promised to wish you a happy birthday." With a confident step, he entered the hallway, handed the hostess the flowers and the gift. "Which way?" "This way," he asked, smoothing his hair. A bewildered Megan nodded her head. Patrick walked into the living room and saw a man lying on the couch with his shirt unbuttoned on his chest. He looked at Megan in surprise. "I seem to have come at a bad time. You could have just not opened the door, Megan." The man looked hurt. But Megan had already come to her senses and took his hand. "On the contrary, you're just in time, Patrick," she said quickly. "Remember when you confided in me that Lara wasn't your daughter? Now I want to tell you my story. You're the only one who can listen to me without emotion right now. Please sit down." Patrick reluctantly lowered himself into a chair next to the table set with festive dishes. Confused, sometimes confused, Megan told him that the man had been brought to her apartment by a friend. She'd never seen him before, but on his chest hung a pendant that was supposed to be worn by her younger brother who'd been missing for years. She pulled the exact same thing out of the sideboard and held it out to Paul. He looked at it, and then at the one on Alex's chest. "Where did you get it?" he asked the stranger. "My foster parents gave it to me. I wore it when I was brought to the orphanage in this town. Apparently it's all that's left of my real parents." "Alex, look, I have the exact same one." Megan held out her jewelry to him. "These two pendants my dad made with his own hands and gave them to my mom when he confessed his love to her. The day my mom disappeared, she put them on my brother and me and told us never to take them off. And then I went to an orphanage and lost my brother. I was only 5 years old at the time. If you have that pendant, you're my brother, my Sam." "Mamma mia," Alex exclaimed and started shouting something in Italian. The Megans Patricks looked at each other in surprise as they watched the man's excited behavior. Then he switched back to Russian. I knew I would find my sister. I believed I was not going to this city for nothing." For the next 2 hours, all three sat at the table and talked. Alex told his story. The half-year-old boy was quickly adopted by a wealthy farming couple from Italy. They loved their adopted son very much, took care of him, and even hired a woman to teach him Russian. When the boy grew up, they told him everything about his father who had died in a fire, his alcoholic mother, withheld only that Alex had a native older sister. His parents were very afraid that he would look for her and leave them alone, go to Russia. Over time, Alex got an education and began to help his parents in the vineyards. And a year ago, his foster mom and dad died in a car accident. After the funeral, the man discovered a box of papers. Going through them, he saw a piece of paper written in small handwriting. It was a letter from his adoptive mother, Louise, addressed to her son. In it, she told him that Alex had a sister, Megan, in Russia. Ever since then, his only dream was to find her. "I arrived in this city late at night, looking for a hotel," the man said. "Some driver picked me up on the street, but I didn't have any rubles and he took me to the exchange office. Before I could even get there, I got a blow on the head and blacked out. Then I woke up and some men were dragging me on the ground into the heating duct. I didn't have any money or documents on me." I see Patrick nodded. "You'd just been robbed." "Yes, that's right. I went to the police, but they told me to drink less alcohol. The guys who brought me in took pity on me, gave me food, treated my head wound. And then they told me I had to make money and put me in front of the mall with a hat. That's where your friends found me, Megan."
"That's incredible, Megan," Patrick exclaimed. "I thought it was your lover at first."
All three of them laughed merrily. Megan and Alex hugged each other. After 40 years, two people separated by thousands of kilometers had found each other again. "We should drink to that," said Patrick cheerfully, pouring wine into glasses. "This is the best birthday present ever," smiled Megan, holding her brother's hand. "I'm so happy for you, it brings tears to my eyes," said Patrick, taking a sip of wine. "Alex, I'm not the last man in this town. I have connections and money." Sam wanted to object, but Patrick made a warning gesture with his hand and continued. "Let me finish, please. So, I will definitely help you to restore all your documents, and then I'll help you get a job. If you want, even in my company, I need people fluent in different languages." But Alex shook his head. "Thank you, Patrick, but I'll be going back to Italy. My home is there, my vineyards, the life's work of the people who raised me and educated me. I can't just leave everything behind, and Russia is already a foreign country to me. As you know, in any case, always ask for help and just call. I will be very happy. And you should definitely come and visit me in Italy. It is a very beautiful, hospitable country." Alex answered. Patrick said goodbye to Megan and Sam, hugged both of them, even kissed them on the cheeks, completely moved by the incredible story of brother and sister. Closing the door behind him, Megan went back into the living room, pulling some pictures out of the sideboard. They hugged each other and looked at the pictures, looking at the faces of the people who had given them life many years ago. A month later, Angelina, Vanessa, and Patrick and Larochka saw Megan and Alex off on the train station platform. Vanessa had tears in her eyes, and Angelina was saying something to keep from crying. "Don't forget about us. We helped you find each other," the woman gibbered.
Patrick couldn't take his eyes off Megan, as if saying goodbye to her. She had become a close friend lately, and he liked her a lot. Taking her hand, he spoke softly.
"I will always look forward to seeing you." A loudspeaker announced the arrival of the train. Megan and Alex grabbed their suitcases and hurried to their carriage. Seeing the happy brother and sister boarding the train, the people seeing them off waved. "Dad, do you think we'll see them again?" Lara asked her father. "We will see them again," he answered, hugging his daughter. He had already planned to take advantage of Alex's invitation and go to Italy together with Lenochka during the winter vacation.